I would like to call back into order this regular board meeting of the Urbana Park District Board of Commissioners. The first remaining item is to accept the remainder of the agenda or else modify it. And I'm not aware of any desire to modify the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented tonight?
So moved.
Moved by Cedric.
Second.
And seconded by Roger. Is there any discussion on the point? Seeing no indication of that, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Cedric.
Aye.
Roger.
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative as well, so that carries unanimously. And so the next item is public comment. And is there anyone here? Oh, do we have Beth Shado here? I'm not.
I didn't see her. Tim, did she come to the meeting room?
I didn't see her at the beginning, and I thought we made arrangements to have her. I know last year we had a disconnect as well and brought it forward the next month. We did talk to her at the Natural Areas Committee meeting about presenting tonight.
Well, okay, since we don't see any indication that she is here, but we then move on to staff introductions.
Great. I think we've got staff here that will be introducing new staff here. I think we've got them listed on the agenda in order. So why don't we just follow through with that?
Okay, so first up is Paula Mondisa. Paula, most of Paula's work career has been in business administration. She is an active member of our church and functions in several capacities there. In her free time, she enjoys traveling, event planning, interior designing, decorating, designing custom gift baskets. I hope you have seen one of those someday. Paula relocated from Chicago to Champaign 36 years ago. So she's been a member of our community for a long time. She has 3 adult children, 3 grandchildren, and is expecting a great grandchild in less than 2 weeks. And another little interesting tidbit about Paula is she is a published author. So welcome, Paula. We're really glad to have you. And I should have said Paula is the new administration office manager. So she's the board's main contact, and she's going to be a very familiar face to you all in this particular meeting. So welcome, Paula.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, even if remotely.
I know, same here.
You'll be seeing it soon enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really.
Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
We're really not standoffish. This.
Okay.
This. Yeah.
Okay.
We're thrilled to have you, Paula, and everybody's been working so hard to be training and orienting, and everybody's been doing a really great job. So definitely welcome aboard.
It's been great. Everyone's very welcoming, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my next staff member, Kathy Niles. She's our new accounting assistant 1, working in the office with Sandy. So she's been going to be doing all of our accounts receivable for the Park District, all the deposits that come in from all of our facilities. And Kathy was born and raised in Urbana, and she's worked in the accounting field for over 30 years. And her first month has been great, she said. So welcome, Kathy, and we're so glad to have you. And she's just been picking everything up immediately. So we're just thrilled to have somebody with so many years of experience in our accounting department. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're always glad to have people who've got their eye on the nickel.
Try.
Katie, was there anything else?
I think you're up, Tim.
Okay, I'll move ahead. Well, I'd like to introduce Laura Orcutt. She is our new finance manager. Just want to thank Laura for working with us in the way she has. She came to us from FMS Incorporated, which is a subsidiary of Arby's. She's had over 20 years experience working in the private sector in finance. And we had a wonderful opportunity to interview with her. I've never really interviewed and hired anybody from a Zoom format, but she just shined right through all of that. And I think her interest and enthusiasm for the Park District is really kind of rewarding at this point. She's been doing a great job working with Katie and the other staff in training and the handoff as everybody's sort of coming in or going to a new place. I just want to also thank everyone in the administrative office. Everyone has been extremely helpful, working extra, including Karen, Sandy, Kelsey, working to help make everyone feel welcome, get the information there. I had a chance to sit down with Laura briefly, and we had a really good connection, caught up. She'll be starting March 21st as her first full-time here with us at all the time. So we look forward to that, and we're very appreciative of Katie's ability and interest in helping to train her. Obviously, all of our staff positions, Paula, Kathy, Laura, there's quite a bit to learn there. The learning curve is probably steep, and they've just had a great attitude and really just pitching in. We couldn't have asked for a better group to come in at a critical time. So we say thank you to all of you. We look forward to working and getting to know everybody better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, welcome everyone, and very pleased to have you on the team.
Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I think, Michael, that's all the introductions.
Okay, and I still don't see any sign of Beth Jado. So I think then we're ready to move on to next item on our agenda, which is the UPDAC committee report. We got a set of minutes, at least in the board packet. Is there anybody here to add to that?
I think it was a good meeting, and I think that the minutes are really cover everything really that needs to be covered.
Any questions for Nancy with regards to UPDAC? Although I know that Cedric was at the meeting too, so I didn't hear.
We did have a discussion, we'll say about membership and folks who initially joined us and haven't made much of an appearance, if an appearance at all, since, and perhaps that was something we ought to be looking at. There was something else about membership we talked about, Cedric. What was it?
Actually, I had like some technical issues during the meeting, and so I actually dropped out about halfway.
There's some discussion about high school students.
Ah, that's right. Yes. Laura had some really good ideas about bringing a wider variety of folks in wider in terms of age, everything else as well. So I think we're looking at membership to try to make it a broader representation of the community in many ways. Do you think that, does that cover it, Corky? Do you think that's?
I think so. We talked about
Yeah,
what
I think
age,
so.
like 18, and then we discussed younger opportunities. And I think we agreed we'd keep discussing options on that.
I think there was some ideas about maybe bringing high school students, maybe under 18, just kind of getting a group, whether it's, I mean, for lack of a better term, maybe part of our teen group where they just come and report or come and discuss ideas. So it was kind of a variation of that topic. Not necessarily, maybe it wasn't so much that they joined UPDAC, but they would just come and report.
You know,
was a little
Corky,
bit
maybe
what I heard.
maybe we could think of them sort of as a school district ambassador, and then they came and brought us information, maybe on a quarterly basis, or you know, depending on how we looked at the UPDAC calendar, so that we had some sense of how the school kids, essentially, we'll demean them and call them school kids, were viewing our offerings and just what in general was going on in the park district. But anyway, we talked about
Yeah.
because we don't have very many young people, and my feeling is that if you're old enough to vote, you're old enough to be on UPDAC.
Well, that certainly seems appropriate, I will say.
Yeah.
And I would also point out, actually, if it's been a while since I've reviewed the bylaws, but I think it's within the bylaws for people to be members of a subcommittee of UPDAC, even if they're not actual full-fledged UPDAC members.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way.
That might be another way to finesse that in some way. But if it's indeed the case that we require 21, I think that's something we ought to very seriously consider changing.
Yeah, I don't think there is an age requirement, but I think that it just was a reminder that as long as somebody's old enough to vote, that we ought to be considering them for a position on UPDAC. Yeah, there isn't. Go ahead.
Well, and just in terms of short term or getting feedback from young people, we do employ a lot of young people in the summer. So if there was a way to incentivize them in focus groups or something where they're also being paid for an hour or two, that might also be a great way to get feedback on issues without having to. And it is an effort. I work with young people. It's an effort to get them engaged. And so if they're employed, there's an interest. So
good idea.
Although I think I'll be a little uncertain about having employees come, because that might be a little iffy. Somebody was talking about some sort of group at the high school that works with, you know, public affairs, that kind of thing, and maybe we could find a person. And if they only had to come maybe twice a year.
I know the high school has a very active service club. We're actually working with them in Rotary, Urbana Rotary. We're tapping into them.
Yeah, and I think in every attendance probably wouldn't be necessary, but 2 times a year we might be able to haul them in. But I think you're right, Meredith. That was something I hadn't thought about, but that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, and I was thinking of like short term, like a focus group. If you want feedback from young folks on this topic and their input, let's pay them for what, you know, their time, which should also be valued as well, and might get feedback, not necessarily to join UPDAC, but as a function of getting feedback from youth.
We also have a group called Camp Fresh, which is a group that Chelsea works with, that, you know, we could bring them in for some input as well, that are kind of the somewhat leaders in the school district. So, you know, could get some options there too. Lots of things to think about and see how we can get some input from teens.
Are the majority of our summer employees Urbana kids, or is it pretty much spread over the whole county? Do you have a sense?
Well, it's a combination. I mean, I would even go out. There's probably some even outside of the county, but Champaign, Urbana is probably a big majority, but we do have others that are outside.
Okay.
Anything else to cover on UPDAC? All right, then let's move on to our consent agenda. And on the consent agenda for this evening are approval of the minutes of the February 1, 2022 study session, approval of minutes from the February 8th regular board meeting, a receipt of our monthly departmental reports, namely administration, planning and operations, and recreation. Action 2, accept the philanthropy report and gifts listed with gratitude. approval of the monthly paid accounts payable. And I believe that that is the end of the consent agenda list. And for those who may not know it, the rules of our consent agenda allow for any single commissioner to remove any or all of these items from the consent agenda for separate discussion and action. Is there any commissioner wanting to remove any of these items listed presently on the consent agenda? Seeing no indication of that, is there someone prepared to make a motion that we approve all of these items in an omnibus fashion?
I move to approve all the action items on the consent agenda and accept all the information items listed on the consent agenda in an omnibus manner.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded, and under our consent agenda rules, there's to be no further discussion at this point, so we will go directly to a roll call vote, starting with Cedric.
Aye.
Roger.
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative as well. So we have unanimous approval with all 5 commissioners voting. And we are ready to move on then to our first reports item. So our financial reports.
As you'll note in the agenda annotated, we do have the finance reports, but it's recommended that Katie and Laura will be here next month to go over both the March and April at the same time. That'll give Laura a little more time to get familiar and still receive some training from Katie.
Okay, so we are going to defer the receipt of the treasurer's report then for audit until next month?
Yes, that was at least our plan.
Okay. But I don't know that we are required to approve it every month, so I think that's okay.
I know we have done that in the past when we had some other issues, but that was at least our recommendation.
Now, we do frequently have a capital budget report. Our Derek and Andy are prepared to discuss that. Is that what I see correctly? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
As long as you approve your treasurer's report before the audit, you're good.
Thank you,
so
Allison.
Should we say, do you want us, oh, so it's before the audit, it doesn't matter.
Yes, we have time still.
Yep, okay.
I think we're ready for the capital updates. I think you're muted, Derek.
I was going to say,
Go ahead.
if Andy wants to start, I can fill in any pieces.
Great.
Okay, I'll start with Blair, Oslide project. As weather's beginning to warm up a little bit, Keith has begun to prepare for finishing the installation of the playground area, which primarily is waiting on surfacing material and a couple other final pieces of the swings and the zip line. He's also beginning to prepare for the challenge course installation, checking his stakes for the footings to make sure everything is still in place from his original locating last fall. And last week, the Sutu wall was delivered early last week to the site, and then the playground installation company and electrician were able to make final connections by the end of the week. We're still waiting for the fencing contractor to come back in and do the final touches around the wall itself. As of now, the contractor has placed temporary fencing around the wall. We're also looking to set up our internal user account through Yelp, which is the company who produces the Sutu, before we fully unleash it to the public. And that's just to make sure we can adjust settings if we need to as things progress and people start using it a lot more frequently. I did go out there and move part of the fencing for a short period of time, excuse me, and threw a tennis ball at the wall. I was able to test out a couple of the games. There was a QR code. It's on the side of the wall itself that you can scan and then interact with the wall. And it basically shows you a map of the world and where there's any installation of any Yelp piece of equipment. And then you can kind of select games and see scores from around the world and compete against others in that manner. And that seemed to be all working fine when I was doing my little introductory test. Once we get those final other items ready, I plan on doing a little more in-depth test with a soccer ball, and I'll have my tennis equipment out there. So hopefully in the next 2 weeks or so, we'll be able to do a full-scale test, and we'll be sure to get some video of that to be able to provide some public information as well. And the contractor for the project is still going to be on site this spring to address any grading and do a complete reseeding of all the disturbed areas throughout the project area. With our health and wellness facility, we received our final schematic design documents from Farnsworth a little over a week ago. Those were also provided to CORE for their review and first estimation exercise. Our internal staff team met as a group yesterday to start going through a compiled list of our comments as we've all been reviewing the document over the course of the previous week independently. And we took some time to kind of review all those comments together and provide any updates back to Farnsworth, which we did yesterday as well. And then this morning, we actually had a meeting with Farnsworth's interiors team, which is to begin looking at options for finishes within the building. And then we'll begin looking at site furniture soon as well. So we'll hopefully have some updates for you on those kind of items in the next month. Kind of moving ahead, we hope to have our first estimate back from CORE in the next week or so, which would allow us to provide an updated budget to DCEO and hopefully get that agreement processed and secured for that funding. And I did also want to do an update on the pre-qualified provider program. We talked a little bit about the program at last month's meeting. I think maybe Roger had asked how that was going. And we've been continuing to work towards our next 3 years of pre-qualified contractors. As you know, with an emphasis on bringing in new MWBE contractors into the program. We began to solicit for those applications in the middle of February. Other than our regular pre-qualified contractors who we've begun to send out our information to, as normally Fred Coleman has also worked to send invitations to around 60, I think he said 50 to 60 certified MWBE organizations in our area for an introductory meeting. 11 of those contractors registered for our presentation. We ended up having 3 in attendance last week. Tim, Derek, and I held the meeting through Zoom. It seemed to be very well received and helpful to those who were interested and able to join the meeting. I will admit we were hoping for a bit more attendance, but on a positive note, I did also receive some additional requests after the meeting from MWBE contractors who let me know they could not make it, but wanted more information, wanted me to send the slides to them from our presentation and just make contact regarding their interest in applying. So I'm pretty optimistic we'll certainly have more than 3 who attended the meeting applying. I checked the spreadsheet today. We have 3 right now who've already applied that have MWBE certifications with their application. And applications aren't due yet. They're due by the end of next week. And then after that, we'll conduct our internal review of those applications, and then ultimately have our new batch of pre-qualified contractors notified and accepted into the program beginning in April.
And I just wanted to add that, one of the contractors attended was someone that we had begun working with prior to this program rollout, dating back to when the board first brought this goal forward. We worked with the City of Champaign's CDAP list and identified a concrete contractor locally who was an MWB certified contractor who's done some sculpture pads for us. And they indicated at the meeting they have another branch of their firm that they'd like to certify. And I say that because I think even if we don't have quite the representation we want initially, we can continue to use the City of Champaign CDAP list and the state list to perform outreach as projects come up and try to build relationships that way. I think it'd be worthwhile to have Fred send a follow-up email out to the entire group, letting folks know that you couldn't make the meeting. It's not a requisite for applying, and that we still welcome you to apply or contact us if you have questions. And it's a start. And like Andy said, I think that the three contractors that attended were very enthusiastic, had great questions, and we're excited to work with them. One of them actually is in a trade where we've been looking for someone for some time, so especially enthusiastic about that. We're going to see how the program evolves. I think I mentioned in my board report that we're also talking with the City of Urbana about their program. They're interested in, for bid projects, those over $25,000. I think their threshold is slightly different. Working with the City of Champaign's CDAP program, where they have a full-time coordinator who runs that program. It's pretty intensive, and so the City of Urbana is looking to create a new position to run their program, and they're wondering if we might be able to cost share with them on such a position. My initial thought that I shared with Tim is that we probably want to look at a proportional cost like we do with the Davy tree inventory. The City of Urbana has considerably more city trees or trees on the inventory than we do, and so we do a proportional split on that agreement annually. And I expect that that they expend quite a bit more on capital on an annual basis than we do, and that could be a basis for an agreement moving forward. We think that makes sense for bid projects because we don't want to create yet another program or barrier for participation in Urbana partnership purchasing and procurement. So to work with an existing program makes a lot of sense, one that contractors are already familiar with and aware of. And as a final note, we've done some outreach to DCEO about their expectations for MWE contractors, and it's not clear yet what their expectations will be, other than that they will have some. It will depend upon the scope of our project and our location. They'll create goals for us, and we'll work with CORE, our construction manager, to develop a utilization plan that then they'll then review and approve. So as soon as we get our agreement in place with DCO, we'll get more information about what those goals are for our project. And so a lot happening on different fronts, and excited that we are where we are with this pre-qualified provider program.
Well, glad to hear that there is progress being made on that. A little disappointing that the numbers aren't higher, but let's hope some more applications come in.
I had a question. I wondered, maybe it's too late to do it, Blair, but I was wondering if, since we've gotten really good at putting up signs explaining about what we're doing, that if we would think about putting up signs, especially maybe for health and wellness, that said, your tax dollars at work. We have a state grant here. We have public donations here, so that folks got a sense of where the money, and especially for a big project like that, was coming from. I don't know, maybe it's not important to people, but I would think that they might be interested to know how much money came from individual donations in the community, for example, or the fact that we were actively seeking grants, so that we are looking for ways to expand essentially the usefulness of their tax dollars.
A great idea.
Just a thought.
Nancy, you're talking about Blair Park, right?
Yes, yeah, I'm thinking that was a bit late, but I was wondering if we, especially if we wanted to do that for the health and wellness.
Yeah. Well, we could certainly do sort of a thank you at this point, right? Some sort of a thank you sign.
Oh, that's a great idea, yeah.
And the tennis courts, which is what we're actively fundraising for, maybe we're still hopeful that we'll land a contractor to do this work this summer. We're hearing that there's a lot of work and not a lot of contractors in our area for tennis striping right now. So I need to coordinate a bit more with MSA, but it may be where we bid it, where we get a price for this summer and then an ultimate price for next summer. We have a very tight window when the work can take place between the two tennis seasons, which is challenging.
Yeah.
For health and wellness, certainly a good idea, and we have a lot to be proud of. You know, our foundation would probably appreciate getting some kudos, you know, to thank private folks. We may have hopefully a list of other new grant sources through, you know, DCO, Park, perhaps ARPA. So we're tracking. Good thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, but I think people are always interested
They
to
do
know
like
that
to
it's
know.
not just their tax dollars. I think that's.
Yep.
I mean, it shows them what a good job you guys are doing, if nothing else.
Well, I would say they expect it maybe when it says your tax dollars theme, but to be able to kind of promote the private side, boy, that's interesting thought. We'd love to follow up.
Well, and especially with the amount of private money that we have raised.
Yes.
I think that's really impressive.
It is.
Absolutely. And the fact that it's primarily from individual donors, I think that's what always knocks my socks off. That there are that many people who are willing to put out, you know, considerable amounts of money to help us build a facility like this is really important. And it's probably not in most of their neighborhoods either.
There's a lot about our community, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I think it does.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the capital budget report? Seeing none, thank you very much. And let's move on to the executive director's report.
Thank you, Michael. Just a few updates. Hope you all had a chance to look over the You Belong Here report. We just had a couple of additions. Corky and I met today with David Dorman. David's one of our UPDAC members, but he works with the Refugee Center. And he had reached out to us, and I think he was interested in talking to us about any opportunities for any type of international event or kind of a cultural celebration. And so we had a very good talk. As you know, staff has been already sort of talking about that. We noted that the Sweet Corn Festival has been retired, and that in the future it may be an opportunity for the Park District or others to look at an event based on international interest or cultural. We talked about perhaps using an existing event or the opportunity to create a new event. So we're excited about that. We'll continue to talk at staff level, and said we would loop back. Obviously, you know, we've got a lot going right now and keeping everything moving, but certainly looking for new ideas. So it's always fun to work with UPDAC folks, especially when they have good ideas and are enthused. So we're looking forward to that. Also, we have an upcoming discussion, Corky, Elsie, and I, with Rob Castaneda. Rob is the executive director of Beyond the Ball, and he works in a more Chicago area, urban area with a lot of outreach with urban youth. So I'd met him at a focus group for the Office of Recreation and Park Resources back in the fall. He was at my table, so we got to know each other and agreed that we wanted to follow up. And we're hoping to kind of learn what they're doing maybe in the city, in the urban area, see how it's different from what we're doing, and just making new contacts. And so we look forward to that discussion. Just want to move on to mention staff thank yous. Just wanted to mention Matt Balk. He reported at the Natural Areas Committee 2 weeks ago about all the extensive clearing of invasive materials along the stream corridor at Meadowbrook. It's just remarkable. Just kind of as a placeholder, when I started at the district, that area, I know I questioned it because one of my main projects was Meadowbrook. Hey, what's all that overgrown area? And at that time, everyone was very proud of the fact that that was the conservation area. And the idea was that you just leave it alone and let it go. And that's where the animals went. And they had some, private times. That might have, been a good approach then, but obviously we know better now. And just want to thank Matt and obviously his list of volunteers and everybody that's helped. But that's a remarkable effort. Please go out and take a look at that, particularly along the stream corridor area. I think it's been a dream to have that thinned out, cleared out. And we know Matt and his abilities. He's kind of a miracle worker. So we're very, very fortunate to have him on staff and his enthusiasm and, diligence to get things done and keep it done. Obviously, he's one person. We have lots of other areas throughout the district that we're still working at, but it's nice to achieve something, and certainly want to recognize him this evening. So if you see him, let him know how much you appreciate that. Moving on, staff teams continue to work on the Dak Pavilion. That's the new pavilion that'll be built up near the Nature Center in between there and the Crystal Lake Family Aquatic Center. Very excited about this. We've talked way back for many, many years about trying to get a better day camp situation. In the past, the Northwoods Pavilion in the middle of the park was used for many years. Access back and forth, traffic control, shutting the park road down, all of those kind of big challenges followed that. When Crystal Lake Family Aquatic Center came along, we also talked about an adjacent pavilion or a series of pavilions that would encourage people to come for the day and hang out. So this kind of in-between area, I think is going to be a nice addition. Just a reminder, for some folks, it may be a change. It's going to be a nice sized pavilion. There'll be a fireplace. We call it a 3 or 4 season building. While there won't be heat, there'll be sort of drop down sides. So that certainly in the off shoulder seasons, you could certainly hold events and activities out there. There'll be a small parking lot and new pathways that link over to the nature playscape and over to the Anita Purvis Nature Center. So we look forward to that. And again, we anticipate, maybe some concerns by neighbors. We'll have some lights out there for, security. But just a reminder to the board, that area of the park has looked very, very different and functioned very different over just my time. When I came to the district, there was 2 active ball fields there. Grass was mowed very tight. There were very few trees, no shrubs. Cars lined both sides of Broadway every evening in the summer for T-ball and Little League or young kids games. So it was a very active recreation site. After we built the Nature Center, we worked with Busey Bank in creating the Busey Friendship Grove. That was sort of an extension of the big grove, kind of a hardwood concept. And then as we continued to buffer and add native materials, kind of encircled that area and created a nice natural area, but a nice open play field. So we're really taking advantage of that surroundings, the area that we've created. And I think the new pavilion will be a tribute to all the people who have served on UpDAC, also create another opportunity for use and events in the park. So again, primarily starting out probably more of a day camp facility. We're not sure what staffing levels we'll have to be able to offer a lot of public rentals, but certainly that could happen down the road. So we'll keep everyone informed on that progress. Continuing on, just wanted to report that the Krt Friends Group finally got established 2 Thursdays ago. Maybe it was last Thursday. We've been working with the steering committee with the Friends Group that has emerged, and I think they're up and running. They've organized or started the organizing board. I'd recommended that maybe they start with the group of volunteers that they have, get all of their bylaws and all of that information together, get functional, and then certainly they could appoint, permanent board members. I think they're kind of a good step ahead because they have some good draft bylaws, which take a lot of time. So that group could be up and running, but I think they envision maybe the next year as a time to get organized, focused. One of the first things they're going to be doing is helping the steering committee organize the Krt celebration that's going to be held Sunday, April 24th over in Oakwood at the new pavilion right along the Krt from 1 o'clock to 3:30. Around 3 o'clock, we'll move over toward the Trestle Bridge, and there'll be some celebration there. Obviously, with the big bridge, that's a good way to get other people to Vermilion County to experience, more of the trail. So we thought it'd be a good idea to host that event there. obviously we'll send out notices and, get people in the know about it. I did reach out and thank Tom Kasich for the articles over many years that he's written. You might have seen his article a few weeks ago in the paper about KRT and kind of talking about how long it takes. I did follow up with Tom, to let him know that a lot of the time is spent dealing with railroad companies. Obviously, grant cycles take a while, but really just trying to get the rails folks to work with you. And, we're still waiting at the Glover crossing, which is in between St. Joe and Ogden. That's a Union Pacific line. Our locals have the underlying rights, so we have all the right to put an at-grade crossing, but Union Pacific's not being cooperative and working with us. So we'll continue to work on that. But again, excited about the Friends Group and some of the things that they can help with. So stay tuned for good things. I think we all looked at the Meadowbrook playground updates, didn't have a lot to add there, but just excited the work that Upland's doing. I think they're getting us into the zone. I think we got some good feedback at the study session, and they're working on updates. So we'll see what they have to roll out at the UPDAC meeting at the end of this month. I think it's a joint meeting with the board invited. So stay tuned for some new updates on that. Going forward, we have the Iapd Legislative Conference. Derek Corky and I are attending tomorrow. It's actually today. We weren't able to join, but we're going over for the legislative educational sessions. And then we have our own meetings, at least proposed to meet April 20th with Senator Bennett and Representative Ammons. Yet to know if it's in person or on Zoom or at a lunch site, but we're working on that. So we have a lot of things to talk with them about. Also, we are doing our Champaign County First legislative outreach, our lobbying events. Today we met with Senator Duckworth and Senator Bennett. So we had a federal and a state legislator and proposed a nice slew of projects, both large and, well, they're all pretty large projects, but some are, multi-millions versus just several $1 million and represented throughout Champaign County. So it's a good balanced act. Thursday, we're talking with Senator Durbin, Senator Rose, and IDOT Secretary Osmond. So we'll be making pitches. I was not able to join them yesterday and somewhat limited today due to meetings. But that's, I think, our 4th year of lobbying efforts. Typically, we've gone to DC and Springfield, but obviously with the last 2 years of COVID, have done Zoom type sessions, which worked very well. And we had everyone's attention today, so that was good to know. Lastly, we had our staff teams met again this week to look at our athletic fields. We continue to look at that as sort of a follow-up to go along with health and wellness, what's needed at Prairie Park and Weaver Park in the future, other sites as well that have existing athletic facilities. But again, what we're trying to do is sort of inventory, assess, and get ready for focus groups, likely survey, work with the community, working with our other partners, Urbana schools, other groups that are involved in recreational pursuits that deal with outdoor courts and fields, really to try to determine, where do we need to go as a district. As you know, a lot of things in recreation do follow trends. We're very attuned to knowing that a lot of youth athletics is really geared a lot, at least the traditional sports, to travel teams. Examples of that, we've seen what Rantoul has done, and now Monticello is talking about a destination sports complex. So we want to get more information and kind of see what's the right zone for the Urbana Park District, and what should we invest in for the future. So we look forward to that work and that upcoming study. Lastly, we would assume that we might get some information out of our next underrepresented, underserved study. So there may be some things we could glean out of that, or as we continue to talk with representatives from groups like that, try to find out more about what interest they have. I just want to make the connection too. We noted probably talking with a variety of folks, having focus groups might be a good idea. We just talked about youth involvement or youth input. Oftentimes when you do community-wide surveys, it may often be the adults or the head of the household filling out forms like that or attending focus groups. So certainly talking to youth, finding out what they want to do. We noted, like, I think it was on our two previous strategic plans, the studies came back, things like skate parks ranked very low. But we just wondered if you had more youth input and discussions, with youth-oriented, age-appropriate groups, you might get different information. So that's sort of the gist there, and stay tuned for that. I can answer any other questions if you have any.
I'm going to put in a little bit of a cent and a half here. I think that I have an interest in us having facilities good enough to attract traveling teams. Tournaments, maybe, I don't know. I would prefer to see our time and energy going into providing recreation opportunities for folks who can't afford to put their kids on traveling teams. I mean, we have a grandson who's a soccer player, and I mean, they are all over and they are gone for weekends. And that is out of the range of a lot of people.
Right.
Not just the folks that we're trying to hit the hardest, but there are a lot of folks who just, and especially now, can't afford it. And then with the, gas prices, it'd be even harder. So I would prefer for the folks who can take care of themselves to take care of themselves, and for us to look after the rest of them.
Right.
Yep.
We appreciate that. And I think, the current, at least there's been many discussion ideas, but one would be, kind of who is our target as a You Belong Here agency? What is appropriate? Who's not getting service? And, where do people go, when they do want to participate? So those are, I think, lined up with some of our thinking and certainly our direction.
Well, I certainly have similar thoughts. I mean, who just jumps instantly onto these travel teams anyway? I mean, there's some more basic recreational, presumably youth learning, whether they like sport A versus sport B versus sport C. And we ought to be the ones who are providing programs that are much broader and more recreationally oriented until people can decide, fine, they want to invest both the money and the time. Yep. There are many families that could probably afford the money, but how on earth do they afford the time to get on these travel kind of teams as well? Yep. It's we need to have options at a lower level and let people learn what they like that way.
Yeah.
The other thing, Tim, I would say is that Weaver Park has been hosting some relatively rare birds in that wetland area. And if there is the way to fence that off and still provide the kinds of facilities that we want, I know that the Audubon Society is concerned about that. So.
Yeah, I think that's, definitely of known understanding. Obviously, we'll probably need to look at available spaces, where could we, propose new type outdoor facilities. We also discussed too, we should definitely be talking with Champaign County about maybe longer term leases on some of the, recreational spaces we're currently using. I guess the thought of losing those really didn't set well with our staff group, but we don't really have, can we create a more permanent presence, I guess, is another way. So learning about what their expansion needs are, if there's ample space, there might be new opportunities there, for the future. That's all I had, Michael.
Okay, if there are no further questions for Tim, then I'll move on to the president's report. Upcoming meetings. We've got the April 5th study session where we'll be going over UPD goals. And as we discussed, we'll probably be having an executive session as well as part of that. And then the April 12th regular board meeting, where we're coming up on the end of the fiscal year. There are a number of annual housekeeping items that we need to cover with that. I'm not going to raise them all here this evening, but there are a number of items that we'll be covering there. And chances are we may also be working with some bid approvals. And that's about all I have to report in that area. Moving on to the liaison reports, the finance study committee did meet on March 4th. So in between the study session and tonight, we did talk a good bit both about health and wellness and also the UIAC stuff, which is coming up at tonight's meeting. We did not cover the recommendations that came to us in the executive session here today. We did not actually go over any of that in detail, but did talk about the UIAC in some detail, and be more of that coming in here tonight. Anything else that perhaps I dropped a stitch on there, Roger?
No, I was going to point to the UIAC because for me, that was kind of the key discussion that we had.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. So the policy study group, I gather there's not much to update there. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have not met.
And okay, then moving on to the Parks Foundation representative, and I guess there's not been another foundation meeting, has there, Roger?
Yeah, we met on the 14th of February. We didn't have very many people there because apparently a lot of people were fleeing the cold and snow. So we had a relatively small group. They're looking for sponsorships for Barn Bash. One of the things that I was pleased with, we chose a different auditing firm, Sikich, and the finance committee has chosen to have them audit their books as well. So they were pleased to have that option. And they have the group that is raising money for the Blair tennis courts, which has raised $105,000 for that at this point. So they're doing well with that. And Kelsey's pushing us really hard on fundraising. So that's it.
Any questions for Roger? Okay, then Updeck Planning Study Group. And again, I gather there's not much news in that regard. Is that right, Nancy?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on to old business. There was no old business removed from the consent agenda, so there is nothing to deal with there. And we can then move on to new business. And the first item is action on resolution 2022-02, authorizing signatures for the Urbana Park District bank accounts, certificates of deposit, and other investments.
As you all know, we just introduced Laura Orcutt tonight. Obviously, with Katie leaving the district, we did need a resolution to authorize our new finance manager, Laura, to be able to assign the district bank accounts, certificates of deposit, and other investments. We'll also be removing Katie Rowland as the outgoing superintendent of business services as a signer on these accounts. So there's a simple motion to allow staff to carry that out.
I move we approve resolution 2022-02, authorizing the signatures as listed for the Urbana Park bank accounts.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions with regard to that?
Michael, did you want a roll call? It didn't call for that in the annotated, but
yes, I yes, we should be doing a roll call, particularly in remote attendance as we are here. So this is on the table, and we can start with Cedric.
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Meredith,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
and I vote in the affirmative as well. So that passes unanimously. Next up is action to award Crystal Lake Park roadway and parking improvements.
Andy's got some information for us.
Yep, I can start with a little bit of background and kind of walk through the memo included with our one-way concept planning study that we had done back in 2018 with Fair Graham. They had contracted Applied Pavement Technologies to conduct a road condition analysis using over 20 cores to establish the current conditions and prioritize areas of failure for future rehab project. They noted that the road had worn well for its age, but some areas would benefit from additional base enhancement with an overall mill and resurfacing project. And so in February of 2020, the board awarded design services to Fair Graham for the Crystal Lake road repair and parking improvements. At that time, we began working with them to finalize the plans for bid ready documents, which also included additional public information and input component, and a lot of those one-way renderings that you had seen probably in the last year as part of our Crystal Lake Park survey and some public events that we had as well. And so moving to the bid, specifically the final base bid included the mill and resurfacing of the entire roadway and the small parking lots that are adjacent to the road itself. So those small parking areas that, an example of one would be by the public kayak launch. So anything that's pretty much immediately adjacent to the road is included in the base bid. And then any areas that were identified for that additional base repair and the road analysis are also included in the base bid. And then we had 7 total alternates. One is for a new parking bump out near the path that goes to the new playground. We had 3 alternates for parking lot resurfacing within the 3 larger parking areas that are not immediately adjacent. So that's one near the large pavilion, one below the outdoor pool mechanical building, and then the one below 901. And we additionally had new parking in the lower east lake house lot with some ADA improvements there as well. The grades that were associated with the ADA parking in both the lower east and lower west parking lots were not up to current standards. So we included that with the alternate work. And then in the lower west lake house parking lot, we added a turnaround and then a replacement of that retaining wall and then a garbage enclosure. And I'll show those in a minute, some of the new items that we're including. And then the final alternate was the longitudinal joint sealant, which is a sealant that runs down the middle of the road between what would be the 2 passes of the new asphalt, which helps keep water from seeping between that joint where they have the 2 different asphalts go down. So it just kind of runs right in the middle along the road the whole way. And that's something that's fairly standard for most of these types of projects, and it's something that IDOT typically does with their projects as well. And so the bid ended up being advertised January 22nd and 23rd. We had an opening on Valentine's Day, February 14th. After the opening, we worked together to evaluate all those alternates based upon remaining funds for that we have on hand for all the anticipated improvements to Crystal Lake Park. And then ultimately recommend awarding the base bid and alternates 2 through 7, which is omitting alternate 1, which is that small additional parking near the playground area. I think we felt for the amount of money and the little additional parking, we would be better served utilizing those funds for other improvements to the park in the future, or to even be of help to the contingency on this project itself. And so the results of the bid, I had a summary within the memo, but Fairgram also provided the full tabulation, the engineer's estimates, and then a recommendation from Fairgram to award to the low bidder, which is Open Road Paving. And then with the budget, we have funds through multiple capital budget years that have been identified for overall improvements to Crystal Lake Park. And those are outlined for you in the memo. And then we're also recommending a 20% construction contingency, which is a little larger percentage than typical, but due to the potential for additional base repair that is not fully determined at this point, and won't be fully determined until we get the road surface milled off. Fairgram and our staff team felt it would be appropriate to prepare for those unknown quantity of repairs with a larger contingency. So we've outlined the total expenses with the base bid and alternates 2 through 7, which would have a total contract of $1,423,810.68. And that 20% contingency would then provide for $284,762.14. And I did mention I wanted to share a few images from the plan set to kind of give you an idea of a couple of the new items that would be included with the project. I believe I can share. 1 second. Okay. So this right now we're looking at, let me scroll up here. This is the, what I was referring to as the lower west parking lot. So the lake house is over here. Here's the lake, obviously. And then the parking area, you can see the triangle zone. This cross hatching is really shown throughout the roadway. This is the areas of additional base repair. So this is kind of what it looked like in the plan set throughout the roadway, where there's additional repair that we've noted through either visual inspection from the surface of the road itself or through those cores. We did also include a guardrail that will then, it's like a timber guardrail that is typical in national parks that will then go along this curved area. This is just an additional safety feature, help prevent any vehicles, bicycles or skateboarders maybe from coming down this hill and going a little bit too far from where they were anticipating. So it's just kind of a safety item there. And then here's our new turnaround by the lake house. And then addressing the ADA parking. And so this turnaround, I know Janet's been pretty excited with as well, to help serve the lake house, catering, people doing rentals, being able to come in, drop off, and then turn back around and go park. And then this is kind of a zoomed in look at that turnaround itself. There's some old timber retaining walls here. Those would be removed. We'll have a colored and stamped concrete retaining wall. It'll have that same kind of color and natural look that'll blend in with the stone elsewhere in the park. And then there's a railing on top of the wall here itself over the turnaround. Here's the new garbage enclosure. And then our ADA improvements shown there. That's where the current ADA parking is located. And then now this is the lower east parking lot. Lake House is over here to left on my screen anyway. And then so we have, again, addressing the grade issues for the ADA parking stalls. That's requiring us to also do a retaining wall here as well. And we're utilizing the Allen block. If you've walked behind the lake house in the last year or so, you've noticed the new Allen block border for the landscaping improvements, and that'll be utilized here as well. And then the addition of 7 new parking spaces. And this was kind of our staff's priority for adding new parking. We see this as the most heaviest and first filled parking lot that services programs or events at the lake house. So I think this is a nice spot to add those spaces as well. And the rest of it, I wasn't going to go through. It's really just showing the current road. So there's not really anything exciting. I just wanted to kind of show some new items that are included as part of the project. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
What was the projected cost for this? I mean, did the bids come in
A little higher
than? Yeah, that's what I thought. But
not too bad. I think overall we were pretty pleased with where it came in. I mean, we kind of had a lot of these alternates split off so that we'd be able to adjust our budget accordingly. And we had a meeting after the bid came in to be able to protect other Crystal Lake Park funds, so we could prioritize future improvements as well, which I know we want to start moving on some lighting improvements in the park in the next year or so as well, and then have some funds protected for our ITEP project and any overages we see for that, which we've done so.
Whoops, I'm on the wrong page. How about, do you want a motion? You ready? Are we ready for a motion? All right, I move we award the base bid and alternatives 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 for the Crystal Lake Park Roadway and Parking Improvements Project in the amount of, $1,423,810.68. with a 20% construction contingency of $28,762.14 to Open Road Paving of Urbana, Illinois.
Second.
Just to mention that it's not 28, but 284,762.14.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Right.
that's a.
I was only off by a lot.
So I'll second that amended.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions on the point? Hearing none, and then we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Cedric.
Aye.
Roger.
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative as well. So that carries unanimously with all 5 commissioners voting.
Tim, what year did we do that portion of the road early in your career? Do you recall?
Yes, we did 2 projects. Let's see, the first overlay was probably about 95. And then a couple of years later, about 3 years later, we did another section.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 years after that. So definitely mid to mid 90s.
And I recall that the hope was to continue doing sections, in years to eventually get the entire road replaced. And
Right.
we bought a lot of time until now. The study that Fairgram did showed that our road is in pretty darn good shape considering its age. But I can tell you that in operations and in facilities, we've been watching it slowly deteriorate for years. And this winter has been harsh on it. It's strange to be excited about a $1 million+ road project, but I can assure you that staff and operations genuinely are.
Just a reminder too, if you recall, one of the overlay sections we did back in the 90s, we determined about within a year that the wrong mix was used on the asphalt. So we went through a lengthy legal process, the city led, because they had done street work, and ultimately we got some money back, but the life expectancy was certainly in question. So I'd say we got our money's worth, even though it's in pretty rough shape right now.
Well, it's particularly impressive to me, given that it's what in that time been twice significantly flooded,
Right.
and not just for an hour or two. I mean, for
Right.
long periods of time, and that I would worry about the base having been truly disturbed in that process. But good to see that they haven't yet found too much going on there. Okay, are we ready to move on then to Porta Potties?
Yes, I think we've got one of our most important bids of the year coming up, and I'll turn it over to Andy again.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites. Every 3 years, anyway. I don't really have a lot of background to provide. This is the, obviously the regular portable toilet bid service that, as of the last 2 or 3 cycles, we've tried to secure in a 3-year term. Our operations staff review the previous contract, and we update the bid specifications for any changes in locations or schedule of the portable toilets. Our bid this year was unchanged from our previous service contract, and that contract expires next week. And we included options in single-year increments for the next 3 years of service. Our bid was advertised in February. We had our opening March 1st. We had our regular 2 bidders submit again with Kemper Industrial Equipment again as the low bid. They have ended up being our service provider for a number of years consecutively at this point, and operations staff have been satisfied with their performance and responsiveness. We provided the bid pricing within the memo. I'll note that Kemper's pricing has only increased in modest amounts, basically $1,000 or a little more a year, even over the previous 3 years. So we're not going to see a big change in our operating budget. And we provided a table within the memo for the estimated cost per fiscal year. And have pretty favorable pricing, like I mentioned. So we're recommending to also award the alternates 1 and 2 for the total of 3 years of service, which would bring the total contract to $88,375.50. And we typically actually do a larger than normal contingency percentage for this contract as well. Just allow us some flexibility for additional units or service requests that may happen throughout the year based on changing usage patterns or any special programming or special events. So yeah, other than that, happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I can make a motion. Lots of questions. So I move to award the portable toilet bid and alternatives 1 and 2 for $88,375.50 and a 20% contingency for $17,675.10 for additional services over 3 years to Kemper Industrial Equipment Incorporated of Champaign, Illinois.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion on the point? Seeing no indication of that, the roll call starting with Cedric.
Aye.
Roger.
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative as well. So we've taken care of that hopefully for 3 more years. Next item of business is action on personnel policy manual.
As the board may recall, we spent a good amount of time at the last study session talking about transition with our COVID approaches. As you know, the governor lifted the mask mandates and a variety of other actions followed. Staff's been working on modifying our guidelines to certainly encourage masking, but the age group we're most concerned about is our under 5 group. Certainly recommend people to mask where they're comfortable whenever they're grouping, keep social distancing, all the other protocols. But the one item that we did need board action on was the extended use of acute illness leave. As you recall, back in October of 2020, the board extended that benefit to allow additional uses of each person's acute leave through March 8th of 2021. That extra benefit really allows staff, if they think they're sick, to stay home, even if they're not under doctor care. The whole goal of that was to encourage staff not to come to work sick, or if they're questionable, and it worked really, really well. I think a number of people used that benefit, taking care of their family, extended family, kids, what have you, anybody under their guardianship or care. And I think that we all saw as a very positive thing. The discussion at the study session was, could we continue to have access to that benefit if there was a need to do it? So as we've lifted our mandate and required vaccinations and testing protocols for anybody that has been exempted, we, I think, agreed at the study session that we did want to extend this benefit and also authorize the executive director to enact or to suspend it. And I think the current understanding is that it would, if approved tonight, would be suspended. And we didn't want to have to wait and rely on public meeting schedules to have the board to authorize it, to put it back in place. Examples of what might drive that: new variant, added current COVID spread to a point where we just had a threat or a concern. So we wanted to be able to put that back in place. So that was the concept. And I think we have a slightly different motion tonight. I think it should read, to extend the temporary adjustment to the personnel policy manual regarding the eligible uses of acute illness leave through March 8th, 2023, and authorize the executive director to activate or suspend the benefit based on, COVID conditions. So apologize that the full motion didn't get annotated there, but I think we all agree that that was something that would probably be wise to have available. And again, it would be suspended right after this is approved. And then as conditions change, we could enact it and it would be available again to employees.
So move.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions on the point? Seeing none, let's go again to a roll call vote, starting with Cedric.
Aye.
Roger.
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
And I vote in the affirmative as well. So that is approved unanimously. Moving on then to item E, Blair Park Tennis Courts recognition. And
go ahead.
As Roger gave in his report on the Parks Foundation, there's apparently commitments of $105,000 for making improvements to those Blair Park tennis courts. Did you have something to add here, Tim?
Yeah, well, I was just going to provide a little background. I think you all recall that the Urbana Parks Foundation was interested in helping the park staff on renovation at Blair Park, particularly the tennis courts. There was a real affinity with one of our trustees, Nancy Schrump, and her family, her brother, Fred. And so I think they were both very enthused at raising additional funds to help with the capital improvements at the tennis courts. So with the approval of the foundation, Urbana Parks Foundation, they did outreach, did quite a bit of research, tracking down former tennis players, people that were connected to tennis in Urbana, and kind of worked with a sort of a subcommittee of our trustees, including staff and a few others on the foundation. The goal was to raise an additional $160,000 that would allow us to upgrade the courts, get them resurfaced, get everything done, put them in great shape. The Park District capital budget was limited. We could certainly do some improvements, get them sealed and coated. but kind of the rebuilding portion would take some additional funds. So they were enthused about that. One of the motivators to help raise money, or at least bring to attention, was at least one of the tennis players that was very involved with that program a few decades ago. David Foster Wallace is a well-known American author, Urbana resident, graduated from Urbana High School, was a standout on the tennis team. So I think the thinking was if they could reach out to the David Foster Wallace Society and other folks that were related, or might have a connection there, that people would be willing to donate. I think there was some draft language that would be placed on a plaque, as well as other donor names that donated at least $1,000 to the project. And the text honored David's contributions, his connections to Urbana in that opening paragraph. As that project continued, I think as Roger reported, about $105,000 has been raised, which is remarkable. It's just amazing. And we really thank the Trump family for their effort. But one of the high school tennis coaches reached out and shared another connection with some information about the author, about David. That was another article that sort of included information about some of his character and behaviors. Apparently, according to that article, I think the board received and everyone read, it didn't put him in the best light and raised concerns immediately with staff. So my response was, we should have a discussion with the board president, park board president, the foundation president, the key fundraisers, myself and Kelsey Beckew. We did have a discussion, shared more information and shared opinions. I think Michael agreed he would talk more with each board member about how we should proceed with that. I think our staff understanding is that the board isn't really in charge of naming, and we include everything from anything of honor printed on plaques, folks' names, businesses, things like that. We really consider that to be the domain of the board. We can certainly make recommendations, but we did need sort of board approval on that. So we agreed that this tonight it would be discussed, and that whatever direction came forward would be shared with the foundation. I think were various opinions shared at that meeting, and I hope you all had a chance to give that some thought, read the information. So we wanted to at least allow the board to voice any concerns or opinions about going forward with the plaque in its at least draft form, the way it's situated in that form of honor. I can pause and answer any other questions if there's questions about the mechanics of that, but it kind of comes down to really, what's the board think, and how would you like us to inform the foundation and proceed with that?
And just you raised the point of naming. As I specifically understand it, the proposal is not to name the tennis courts or the area after
Correct.
David Foster Wallace. The proposal is to install a plaque referring to his activities in the area and the fact that he's a well-renowned author. But it's not a naming opportunity per se, as I understand.
Well, I would add, I don't think the board was, staff was comfortable, just agreeing, to what would be on the plaque, unless there was a clear understanding, from the board. Obviously, the nature of the article that was written, raised some concerns. And so I think we really wanted to open it up and kind of hear from you all, or at least get direction that we could pass back on to the foundation.
I can open. I do not support the plaque. I think context matters, and in the environment and sort of in what we're looking at on the tails of the Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter, our tagline is "You belong here." I don't think that a plaque to David Foster Wallace is in line with that, and I really can't find a defensible answer to if somebody would question us, why would we put a plaque to somebody who is yes, a well-known author, but does not excuse his behavior towards women, and what was documented in that article. And I shared my rationale at length in an email with Michael, but so I don't need to feel like I need to go into it unless at length, but I don't support this.
After kind of mulling it over myself and speaking with some of my peers, I am also kind of leaning against this. I don't know. It's really hard to say, especially because it's like in a situation where, this person is deceased, and that concept of separating the art from the artist. But at the end of the day, it kind of just doesn't seem appropriate. That's kind of my takeaway.
I share that same idea. I guess over the years, I have counseled a lot of women in marital situations. I don't know how much I want to go into detail here, but there is a pattern in this that disturbs me in terms of the way that at least one woman was treated, that could have escalated beyond which it did. And so I am concerned about that. I'm concerned about women who might find themselves in that kind of situation, and have a plaque that reminds them of someone. How much people will know, I don't know, but I am concerned.
I'm kind of at the not quite the opposite end of the scale. I would not favor naming anything in his honor, but I also would like to remind people that David Foster Wallace was a mentally ill person. I don't think there's anyone that would disagree that he wasn't mentally ill. I would say that the allegation was 10 years after his death, there was no chance for him to respond. And I'm not saying that it wasn't true, because it sounds like it was true, but there was not a string of people who came and said, me too, me too, me too, me too. Doesn't say that it wasn't the case, but it's something that we don't know about. And I find it difficult, because I feel too often that we are judging people from the outside, and we're saying because of this particular behavior, the rest of what you do is essentially invalid. And I'm not sure that that's the right way to go about it. I mean, there aren't very many of us that are.
I just like to offer that I don't think that it was undocumented, his behavior. I mean, if we look at the article and the pieces I quoted, it was documented in autobiographies.
Yes, but were there others? I didn't say it wasn't true. I believe that it was true, but were there others?
So I don't think that this needs to, I mean, my opinion of this is that we don't need to have repeat people. One person is enough. Right. This is the challenge. I gave an example of, I recognize there's this struggle as well between the art and the artist, but at the end of the day, we wouldn't even be engaged in this conversation if it wasn't about fundraising. And so this is about money, right? We wouldn't even be approaching the subject if we weren't fundraising for Blair Park, or the foundation wasn't fundraising for Blair Park, all in good faith. And I feel as if we've stumbled into sort of a very touchy minefield, and you know, let's be on the right side, I guess, is what I feel like. in
But how
terms
do
of
we determine what's the right side? I mean, it's the right side for the current ideas about things. I mean, would you, if you found out that that Picasso slapped his models around, would you not look at? I mean, how do we know?
But we have the information now, right? I mean, I think that's for me, that's the piece. We have this information in front of us now. In the past, maybe this information wasn't available, but it is available to us now, and we have to make a decision based on what we have in front of us. And so my decision is that I do not support this.
Well, my viewpoint, I think, is somewhat similar to Nancy's. I think clearly this was a mentally ill person who also accomplished a lot of things in his life. And if we are going to set a standard that somebody cannot be honored in any way in the park district, if they have some blemishes on their record, we might have a lot of further issues to deal with. I mean, there's some very well-regarded people who perhaps have had marital problems, and we have statues in our parks perhaps honoring them. I mean, Abraham Lincoln was well known to have bouts of depression and may well not have treated his spouse particularly well. Yet we will retain that statue, I certainly hope.
Right, but you guys are both talking about like what ifs, right? And we're talking about like right, that is not just a single person's allegation, but like kind of something that was understood about David Foster Wallace to the degree that like one of the biographies directly quotes a letter written by Wallace apologizing for one of these events. So it's hard to say what if in a situation where like we know what I would say is for sure. And then there's another aspect that I haven't read any David Foster Wallace books myself, but from some of the other articles that I've looked at over doing research about this, is that his writing may have been genius in the 90s, but it's not necessarily representative of a lot of the mindsets of the current generation. The way that he speaks about women in his writing is like not representative of how women are in reality, I would say. So that's something to be said as well. I think that David Foster Wallace may have come out in a time that was like his style of writing was really big, and I don't know if it will continue to have the same effect as we move forward in the future. This is a really tough situation though, for sure. And I also have like a question, like kind of directed towards Roger, that it's like, how much of this fundraising like was expressly surrounding the idea of honoring David Foster Wallace, right? Like, because that's another aspect of this that's tough, is like, if we in essence put our foot down, how many people will say, well, I don't want to continue contributing for this?
That's a good question, Cedric, and I truly don't know the answer to that.
Cedric, I do know one of the conversations I had as follow-up, certainly with Nancy, was the idea that, depending on what the board determined tonight, and we do need to get some direction tonight, because I think there's a few people that are being approached and they would like to know before. But there were a number of people that were at least aware of, David. They were classmates or teammates or were well aware. I think the idea would be if the board decided to make a different recommendation to not include that, that it was felt that anybody that expressly was connected or gave should be at least notified. The idea would be then if people want to continue or keep their donation, toward the tennis court. Courts still need help. People play tennis there. It's a beautiful, wonderful park. We certainly need their help, but they would be given the option if they wanted their money returned or redirected to some other area. And I think that's the understanding of the fundraising team, is they would honor whatever this board said and respond back to donors. I don't have an exact count. Not sure if Nancy has an exact number of, who in the David, column versus, just gifts, directed to help tennis. But I think she said, there were a number of people that made those connections and were well aware of it, and was part of their understanding.
What exactly?
Yeah, there were personal connections here. I mean, Fred Schrumpf
Right.
was a Park District tennis instructor, as I understand it, and he specifically taught David Foster Wallace as a pupil, and obviously made some kind of a personal connection there. There's the Schrumpf family, but it was hardly that Schrumpf family alone. Rick Goldwasser contacted me some years back, wanting to take up the mantle for this, and I had no clue about David Foster Wallace's background at that time either. But these are former Urbana residents with deep interest in tennis, had a real connection with David Foster Wallace through that. I mean, there is some definite personal contact and connection with regards to the people who have really managed the fundraising on it. Doesn't make it right necessarily, I grant you. I just am a little worried at exactly what level we want to hold people accountable. This is hardly the sort of situation where David Foster Wallace exerted positional power over other people the way a Harvey Weinstein or a Mr. Epstein or folks of that sort, where the really big age differentials, big power differentials, and indeed he is well known to have suffered mental health issues through much of his life. So I think it's just not a simple black and white circumstance in my own head. There are a lot of shades of gray in this, and I would be fine with going ahead with it. I've heard at least 3 commissioners say that they are not happy with doing that. If we count, 3 is what it takes to make a decision. If you folks want to make a motion and carry through with that.
Tim, what is the plaque to say?
I brought a copy of it. I can read it. I hope I have it here.
I have it. It's in the email, right? Okay.
Yeah, I've got it. It's at least, again, this is the draft that was at least put together. David Foster Wallace loved the game of tennis. He learned how to play on these very courts. He competed on the Urbana High School tennis team and taught tennis for the Park District from 1978 to 1981. He was an author of novels, short stories, and essays, and a professor of English and creative writing. His lifetime fascination with tennis served as a central theme in many of his works. David is best known for his novel, quote, Infinite Jest, unquote, cited by Time magazine as one of the 100 best English language novels from 1923 through 2005. His book, String Theory, a collection of essays about tennis, is classic of American sports writing. He received a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award in 1997 and is considered one of the most innovative and influential writers of his generation.
I think that's about 10 times longer than it needs to be. Personally.
Just a note on that. We did talk about plaque cost, lengths, things like that. So that certainly could be edited, but I think that's the preferred, or at least the understood language that would go along with it.
Right, but the general gist of it is that he learned to play on these courts. He loved tennis, and he wrote not only well about tennis, but other things as well. Right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
And I think, well, we'll see what the board thinks.
Well, I'll make a motion that we remove it's not there, so I guess that we do not move forward with the plaque for David Foster Wallace for the Blair Park Tennis Court renovation project.
I will second that.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. We've had quite a bit of discussion. Is there any further on the point?
I just would like
Okay.
to make one more comment, I guess.
Sure.
That I think it's really dangerous to make comments about power in terms of just age and time and distance, or sort of age space. I have seen when there's a dominant culture involved, I have seen young men be extremely vile to older women. And so I just want us to be careful about things like that. I've seen that in my own work. It's something we deal, and we have this dominant culture. And I'm not suggesting that I think we're setting any type of standards. We're just using the information that we have at hand to make decisions and think about the context of the world in which we are currently living in. And that this was brought to us by the tennis community also at Urbana High School. So I feel like those are some important points that we didn't address, and that's all.
Just wanted to add there's an opportunity for the Park District and the foundation to be more thoughtful in the future. I know in my career, to be honest, we probably didn't do a lot of background search, any sort of personal, looking at anybody's past, but certainly with social media and going forward and the amount of information that's out there, it may be something we want to incorporate into our practices so that, we can maybe, be ahead of anything like that. And again, you may not know of anything and things could arise later and you would, need to deal with it later. In this case, at least it was discussed ahead of time. And so certainly we could probably put a few measures in place to help with that in the future.
One statement that I would make, and I respect what both Nancy and Michael have had to say, but I think that mental illness, while it is a serious problem in our culture, I still think that people are responsible for their actions. And that's the way that I feel. I have worked with women who have had husbands who were alcoholics, who were mentally ill, who were whatever, and it still doesn't make it morally right.
So perhaps we should just turn down all the money from the Shrumps completely then.
I think at least, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, well, I certainly had the conversation with Nancy. She's got some discomfort with this as well. And I think they did agree that if this board decided not to move ahead with that they would go back and approach their donors and see what they wanted to do. I do, and it's a little off topic, but what Tim brought up, I hope we're not seriously talking about investigating every donor at a level of naming something, trying to do a background check. I mean, that's just beyond our ability to do. And I would truly, it would be a really a chilling kind of process to go through when we're doing serious fundraising for health and wellness, and there will be other things in the future. You really got to look into the all possible background of potential donors. And I will agree, this information came forward in quite a different way. Anyway, we do have the matter on the table. Are there any other questions or comments before we call the roll on it? Okay, starting with Cedric.
Aye.
Roger.
Aye.
Meredith.
Aye.
Nancy.
Nope.
And I vote no as well. So that carries 3-2. And so it's the board's decision that a plaque for David Foster Wallace should not be placed in Blair Park. Okay, and we can then move on then to item F, review of Urbana Indoor Aquatic Center finances.
Right. We've got our staff team here and aquatic staff and matrix members really to sort of roll out a new direction for the Indoor Aquatic Center for the Park District. Just want to give a little background and talk about some of the key issues that we've kind of looked at and been facing, and then talk about some recommendations that I think are being shared tonight, also at the Urbana School District Board meeting. Just a little background, back in 1999 or 2000, we started working with the Urbana School District and the Urbana Park District on the idea of creating an indoor facility. At that time, I think what motivated the Park District was we had access of the Mary Alice English Fund, which was a very nice, ultimately resulted in a nice financial gift to the Park District, but it was expressly only allowed to be used for indoor aquatics in Urbana. And so there was a narrow timetable, I believe, I don't remember exactly, about 10 years or so. But the idea was if within that time period, the indoor aquatic facility didn't appear, the remainder dollars would be shared, and it was listed who would receive those funds. At the same time, the Urbana School District was looking at a number of school-based improvements to a number of buildings. And I think the idea was, could we work together, couple our gift and an opportunity to add an indoor aquatic facility at the Urbana High School at that time. That moved forward, and as kind of moving that along, there was our first 17-year agreement with the Urbana School District. That original agreement was, I call it kind of, was really based on a formula, kind of an approach, based on who was using the pool at what time, and that cost was assigned to the group. So there was Park District time, school district time, and then public time. And the public time was shared as far as cost. The facility was developed, built, and since that time, we've worked with 4 superintendents. Gene Amberg was the superintendent in place at that time. And I think for the early years, that seemed to go forward and still hold together. In 2006, we had a very devastating fire. And by devastating, I mean, it didn't burn the building to the ground, but it really shut the facility down. It really impacted a lot of the internal workings, the HVAC and many of the systems. I think we had about a, 12 to 18 month recovery time to rebuild the facility. One of the things we discovered in that recovery was some of the major HVAC ducts were blocked by the insulation that had fallen down. So we actually did improve some of the air handling qualities after the fire. But one of the things that we never recovered from was losing a large number of members. We never regained that level of support since that time. After that 17-year contract was completed, we worked at that time with Don Owen, the superintendent of schools, and we created the 5-year agreement. And that 5-year agreement, and I'm just using my basic words, we moved to more of a shared cost, a 50-50 approach. And the goal really was try to move away from creating scenarios that if you weren't using the pool, you didn't get charged that time. It was basically more of an even split. Capital was handled a little bit differently, but the idea is that we would encourage use of the facility and people would not necessarily be so-called penalized for their time. We completed that 5-year agreement, and with our current superintendent, we created an extension of that agreement. During that time, a number of key issues have come up for the Urbana schools and the Urbana Park District. I'll speak mostly about ours, but I think we can speak to some of these, based on what we know through the Aquatic Matrix team. Certainly rising costs have continued to challenge that facility. I think the current administration has determined that it's not sustainable to continue with that the way we're currently doing it. We're obviously facing staffing shortage, mostly COVID related, the last few years. Certainly that has impacted the use and certainly impacts, revenue and who becomes members. During that time, more critical needs have arisen in the community. For us, we're looking at a new health and wellness facility, number of other critical developments at Crystal Lake Park, very aggressive trail development program, linking us to the Krt, and any other number of internal changes. I would point to the You Belong Here, which really created a cultural shift in how we see dollars and resources going back to the public. We have not been able to find high-level sponsorships or groups, businesses, or individuals that would donate money. One program area that I think all of us, I know on the Park District side, wanted to see continue was the school-based PE classes, primarily 3rd grade or younger level of kids. The idea was to twofold, get everybody experienced in water and water safety, and also more recent years, I think we viewed it as an equity opportunity to allow more youth to have access to aquatics. We've continued to, each year look at our rising cost. And I think, when Jennifer Ivory Tatum became superintendent, she began talking to me about, what's the future of that facility. I think at the same time, the school district looked at and did research on all the other schools in the Big 12, that's their local high school conference. And they found that none of the pools offer a program like the Urbana Park District and the school district. They simply are pool-based or school-based programs to accommodate their diving and swim teams, boys and girls. And they're open and the pools are active during that season, and then they're closed down for the rest of the year. That is an arrangement to help contain costs, provide safe access, in and around the pools. And so I think the major desire more recently has been for Urbana schools to really follow that model. So I think the current recommendation is that the Urbana School District would take back the management of the indoor aquatic facility. It would be used during their pool season, which would again be the swimming and diving season, roughly when they start in August and ending in February. Staff put together some really good financial information as part of that discussion that we were having with their athletics committee that's looking at athletics in the Urbana schools. Thank you, Leslie and Corky, for putting that information together. I think if you reviewed that information, we could go over it tonight if we need to, but you'll see a number of scenarios, and each of those goals were directly intended to reduce the direct cost for both agencies. I think what we found in the reductions, there was actual cost increases to the Urbana Park District. For example, lost revenues or reabsorbing staff into our regular budgets. So it's, came at a considerable cost to the Park District to follow through and recommend even a reduced schedule. And I think as part of our discussion, there was one idea floating around of, hey, could we just shut down for the summer, rely on Crystal Lake Pool? And again, with that inequity of who would actually pay more, it didn't seem to support both districts' ability to find any savings. I think the last column in the financial report indicated what would it look like if there was no UPD in that equation, essentially the schedule more or less that I described. In addition to that, I think Leslie acknowledged, depending on how the school district saw the itemized budget, there could be other ways or other line items, they could absorb in different ways, whether it was staffing, custodial, utilities, other services. So we've met a few days ago with their athletic committee and leadership, with our leadership team and some of our aquatics matrix members. And I think that's the direction that the school district would like to go forward with, is to take back the management. The park district would be out of the indoor aquatic center. We did discuss future options of maybe some level of programming, whether it was lap swim, water aerobics, what have you. I think their initial concern was, their risk carriers are sort of challenged with non-school use when it's in their hands. They didn't completely rule it out. My sense was, they would probably have to investigate that a little more, see what that would cost and what that would look like. I think our idea we'd become a renter of space, if you will. And that would then allow us to rely on our outdoor aquatics. If we saw a need for indoor programming, like swim lessons, aerobics, guard training, certainly our past has, included area-wide pools that would allow us to rent space. So we could very likely continue offering those programs, albeit in a different location. So that's the discussion, I think, or information we wanted to present to the board. I think they're, again, presenting that same idea to their board. My sense is that's basically what's being dictated to us. They own the pool. If you remember, in the early first 17-year agreement, there was a provision to provide 10% ownership to the park district of the facility. That never was realized. I think it was determined that it was, I'm going to say, not possible. There wasn't a way to cleanly delineate ownership. I think once that's kind of settled in with the park district, we felt maybe that worked out okay, that maybe not having a stake or an ownership, certainly a partnership, could be changed and amended. And it's certainly possible in the future if, our fortunes change, or there was a sponsor opportunity or a way to create outside revenue to help operate or to support certain programs, we could revisit that. So I think the proposal at hand that staff's working on is to bring forward the current contract or lease agreement that we have in order to have it approved. And within that agreement, it has sort of a back out or a cancellation clause that we can notify the district in concert with them when they would begin taking the pool facility back over. Our staff's very happy and more than willing to transfer knowledge, train their staff on how to operate. Certainly there's in between roles if needed and asked. We're certainly willing to do that as a long-term serving partner in Urbana. But I think we've come to that point where a new direction's in hand, and we will celebrate the fact that we have a award-winning, fantastic outdoor seasonal facility, and that the school district will return to a more traditional indoor pool arrangement. Again, we've accomplished and met our first 17-year agreement and have no obligations. We completed our next 5-year lease agreement and have no obligations. We extended that for another year, and we're actually essentially suggesting it be extended for another year to be amended and ended around the January, February time, whenever our time is up there. Certainly we would review the agreement, follow the notice when we should give them a heads up that it's time for that. And I think their staff was willing to learn and take over the operations. So that's what's being discussed at the school board. That's the direction we were given to present to you all this evening. Certainly there could be other staff comments, but I wanted to at least pause there to get that main message across. We've benefited greatly from access to that facility, but it certainly has come at a cost to the district. Some things we've realized is, primarily there's sort of a shrinking user group. When we look at equity issues of who's coming to the pool. We often find that it's folks with more socioeconomic opportunity. We've not been able to realize an all school access approach so that everybody gets a chance to be there. That's more due to cost. There's certainly some management issues that we know go along with that. But what it also does for the park district is allow us to take back and absorb our staff. We certainly have a new health and wellness facility that would benefit from more operational capacity, more recreational capacities, and certainly focus on our outdoor aquatic center as our mainstay that we did really the majority of our history as the Urbana Park District. So I think the kind of the takeaway is, things change, and that we shouldn't have any, misgivings or bad feelings toward the school district. It's just a situation that the rising cost could no longer be supported. We were unable to find outdoor support that would have to come each year to underwrite that entire facility, and that it's really an opportunity for both districts to realize some savings, still provide aquatics in Urbana, and then look to another day when maybe something could change in the future. We also recommend that we should take a really good look at the English fund. We would recommend that we use that money this year for our portion of our cost. Remember, it's a designated fund and can only be used for indoor aquatics. It cannot be used at Crystal Lake Pool. It cannot be used in any other way, and would essentially become a dead fund to the district unless we were able to build a new pool in the future in Urbana. I shared with the finance study group, I think at the CU Special Rec opening, I talked to 3 Champaign Park commissioners and just kind of talking about general things for the future. They wondered if there was an opportunity down the road for us to talk about maybe a joint indoor facility. I was reminded that the English fund could only be used if it was located in Urbana. So the likelihood and future of that, again, that was just one idea. I guess I bring it up because it's not saying that it couldn't be revisited in the future. And lastly, the health and wellness facility, we selected Prairie Park for future expansion. If that facility needed to grow, there's certainly capacity in that area to expand that facility. And it's well situated, certainly in a residential neighborhood area that it might, someday lean itself or lend itself to a future opportunity. I wouldn't necessarily rule out other opportunities. We did visit it one time before with Crystal Lake Pool in putting some sort of cover or bubble over the lap pool. I know the city of Galesburg is looking at that right now with their city pool to create an indoor opportunity. So it doesn't necessarily say that we can never have indoor aquatics at a public level at the park district, but it just certainly has, become a situation that is not sustainable, one that will likely, pass, and we'll look to the future to see what we could offer. There could be, again, future, opportunities down the road if the school district could find a way to create some level of access, but that would solely be their decision, and they would have to manage and afford, what it took to support that facility. So that's, I believe, the direction the staff's presenting tonight, and we would plan to come back with the same agreement that we signed last year with the intent to approve it, and further to end that agreement at the appropriate time.
Could you explain what is perceived to be the appropriate time for ending it? I'm confused on that point. This all seems to be a snowball running down the hill pretty fast to come to some decisions which have not been very much aired with the public. Exactly when do you expect a cutoff in that?
Corky and Leslie, do you remember the specific details? Thank you.
Yeah, I can give details. So, some of the initial discussion, again, I want to go back and state that we tried to have conversation in the pool management team since August, right after we got done with the study session, where we talked about the agreement, and we kept getting pushed back, and finally, it actually was almost the end of January before Jennifer Ivory Tatum was involved in a meeting, and we started hearing a few things from them. Of course, Tim and Carol and Jennifer, I think, have had discussions. But anyhow, not our intent for it to come this quickly, but their discussion in late January was, we need to do something for the summer. And so we want to close down the facility during the summer. And we said, well, we can't shut down in May. I mean, we're in the midst of programming in May. The outdoor pool doesn't open until June or late May, Memorial Day. So I think it's best that we start thinking from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Well, then they started having us put budgets together. And again, I think Tim and Carol and Jennifer had discussions in the midst of this. And one question they started asking, well, what if we only have lap swim? And so then we put a budget together. And I said, well, Leslie, if you're going to put together a budget with lap swim, you need to do lap swim and programming, because I'm not doing just a lap swim. So we started working on that. And then within the same day, it was, what's it look like if it's no UPD and just the school district? And so we started working on numbers like that. And from there, we met, I think it was Monday, Tim, Monday morning. Is that right? No. We met, Monday morning we met.
Monday, 10 a.m.
Yeah. Right after the finance meeting, we did touch base with them again and let them know our discussions. And they wanted to meet Monday morning, yesterday. So we met. And that's when they came up with this idea that we want to close for the summer, for June, July, and August. And then we'll start back up the park district in September, but their swim team season goes from August through February for the boys and girls season. And that's when they said they would like to have it ownership or closed, I guess. So that's kind of how the timeline went down.
We did discuss, the public, aspect of it, but my sense is that, they're really recommending that they follow a more traditional school model, which is, school swim teams, predominantly and only, I guess I would say. They did check with each group. Every other school in their conference has that arrangement. So I think that's really kind of a key point in this whole thing is, really after that first round, and I would say, as we transitioned superintendents over the years, it became increasingly, aware to us all that we didn't have the same vision for this facility. We saw it as, a high cost, high touch kind of facility, but, it created an opportunity. I just don't believe that was shared at the same level. While it was acknowledged, there was always a disconcerting feeling about the contribution they were making. Remember, the school district's mission is education. As part of their education mission, they do have athletic and team sports, but it's in that context, not a wide, public support outside of that immediate need that their tax dollars support. So again, we've over the years, discussed and tried to approach different groups. I know BC Bank was approached at one time to see if they would underwrite on an annual basis, and we just couldn't find anybody to support that facility. It is a high touch, high cost facility. I think their intent is that it would be directly used for those programs. They wouldn't need guards, for example, for their swim and diving teams. So there's an enormous saving on the staff. They have contractual custodial that based on just that use, you could probably manage that facility on the custodial side. And then operationally, they have any number of, operation staff with skills in plumbing and electrical and HVAC and other skills. So they're probably just as capable, if not more capable than the park district to manage that facility. So I think with their ownership, their abilities, their limited need, and their focus, on their mission, that's what led to their determination that's the direction that they're going to go in the future. So I would recommend, we follow suit and support that, do our part to close it out. And then nothing is stopping us to look at other alternatives for any portion of that program that we could afford to carry forward. I do want to point out, as we open a new facility, we don't have a lot of margin built in. We certainly did pro forma work. My reasoning and by discussing this isn't to say that's why we did it. That has nothing to do with it. But I would suggest the staff and the staff shortages and the resource and the rising cost of operating certainly have me concerned about our future at Health and Wellness. We certainly have our hands full with Crystal Lake outdoor facility and the future capital cost and things we'll need in place. So again, we view it, I think I view it, I won't speak for every staff. It's been a great facility. It served our joint interest and needs, but things have changed to the point it's no longer a affordable and viable, sustainable option for either district. And so I think they're suggesting that that's the direction that they go, and they present us with a contract or a lease agreement for this next year that we'll need to review and notify upon the terms in that agreement.
And can I just ask some clarification? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I don't find the budget that I'm not following it very well. I just want to make sure I understand that essentially we were both providing, both the school district and the park district were roughly providing $200,000 of an operating budget each for $400,000, and the other $150,000 was coming from fees that were generated from various activities. And so we will then be saving $200,000 of our budget, and the school district is looking at this 186 number to run the pool on the very bottom of the page, sort of as so they're still spending the same amount there, but slightly less.
More or less, they can reallocate some of their funds to other places. So
so just making sure I'm following things clearly. Correct. And for the viewers at home who might watch, think that this is sort of the total volume of what we're talking about.
Part of what you're saying is that they can hide some of the expenses in other lines.
Well,
okay,
that's true, Michael.
It's gonna cost the community the money to run the pool.
Right. And I should add too, and we've looked at this over the years, we don't think we can increase prices enough to, cover all those added costs. There's a break point, I think, and we're probably there on gate fees, memberships, things like that. I don't believe we could translate all the new costs into a gate fee and assume that we could sustain that, and hold on to that.
And we have about $500,000 in the English fund.
Correct.
A little over that, I believe, in that vicinity. Yes. Okay. So again, I think part of our discussion tonight would strongly recommend as we go into our budget cycle that we start pulling our share of that money over to that to help further provide savings, put that fund to work. Otherwise, it just gets tied up and will sit in a bank account until another day. So
Can you reframe that? What do you mean?
The English fund, yes, that we would appropriate more money out of the English fund to be used for our UPD contribution for this next
fiscal year
going into it. While it won't help us all the way, and we wish we could have maybe used it, prior, we would suggest we would access, basically what it would cost us to operate, utilize that fund, or be comfortable that we would still use our tax support and that fund would sit there unusable in the future until another indoor facility was available in Urbana.
I'm concerned with Michael of the community response as well.
But I think that's something the school district probably needs to address. That would be their reasoning. They're saying it's not sustainable. They can no longer continue to operate there, and that go ahead.
I mean, I absolutely understand all those points of view. I think that the community doesn't see the black and whiteness, right? I mean, I think that was part of it, right? It's school and park together. And so they may not make that distinction. And so we should be prepared for letting the community down,
Right.
even if we aren't, like the perception will still be there. I
Right.
mean, in terms of, you know, the brand new Tiger Shark swim team, all of these things that we have worked on in the past
Right.
to support it. So I guess I just want to make sure we're thinking about that.
We are, and I think that was the idea of, you know, kind of renewing the agreement and then take the remainder time to share that information, do the transition, make sure we have opportunities to, you know, create information in that next upcoming season or fiscal year. So we do have a number of months that we can, you know, certainly let people know. We would be able to look at, you know, new locations for, you know, any indoor aquatics that we might want to continue with. So that would be our next steps, you know, to see where and how many in which we could relocate into other facilities.
Well,
You know,
let me
go ahead.
There are no other facilities.
Yeah, I mean, we rented hotel swimming pool space during that fire outage shutdown and did some things of that sort to at least keep some community programs going. I don't know whether the English fund monies qualify for that or not, but
Katie believed they would. I know we discussed it with Katie Rowland. She believed it would. Certainly we'd want to look at that, you know, and review it again, Michael. But that was, you know, just based on Katie's understanding of that agreement and how the money could be used.
As long as it was in Urbana.
Right.
One question that I have, we are renewing this for a year. Is that correct?
Let me be clear. I think at the meeting with their committee and our staff team, that was the recommendation. I think everyone came to that. The agreement is already in place.
Everyone, including UPD staff as well as school district staff, because I mean, this whole thing struck me as being very much driven by the school district, and for us to be a co-equal partner in shutting it down doesn't taste very good to me.
Well, and I guess my question is, we're not using it in the summer. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and they will be using it from August on for their swim teams.
Correct.
So why are we doing a 1-year contract?
Yeah, what do we get out of it?
I think the idea was because we probably need something presented at the April board meeting, and due to the delay of discussing, it doesn't allow us much time to create a whole new agreement. So the idea was, could we use the current agreement, extend it, and then execute the exit clause, if you will, to get out of the agreement that they would mutually agree to.
So we're doing a 1-year contract, but planning on an escape clause, what, at the end of May?
Well, we're doing a one. Well, here's the other tricky part with the agreement is that if we don't sign another agreement, everything that we have planned for May doesn't happen.
Right.
So
wait, I'm sorry, Krt, could you repeat that? You froze up on my
screen. I'm sorry.
No, that's my fault, not yours.
No. So our agreement expires April 30th.
Ah.
So from the park district's perspective, May's very important because we want to make sure we maintain our participants going through until our outdoor pool opens, right?
Okay.
So if we don't have an agreement in place, then we've got programs that are scheduled that are going to be basically canceled, right?
Okay. Okay.
So
early.
The summer months, like you said, June, July, August for the park district, we won't be doing anything there. We'll start up after Labor Day or Labor Day weekend, that September. That's when we'll start doing our stuff again. Our plan in the meantime is trying to work on, hey, what are we going to do for water aerobics? What can we offer? It could very well be maybe there could be some rental space in the indoor aquatic center. Maybe. But we need some time to plan for that so we can move forward versus just saying, I don't want to just say in April we're done, because we've got programs that are scheduled and booked to go through May.
Sure.
What will our costs be?
The
when
way
they're-
these contracts, I'm sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
What will our costs be if we're in an agreement with them? And
Okay.
they close the pool to the public essentially for those months.
So here's what happens June, July, and August. So us closing down, we are already absolutely taking $10,500 from that budget for operations salaries over to Crystal Lake Pool.
I'm sorry, Corky. I'm gonna put you. Could you do that again? I'm gonna start this up on my phone because I'm missing this, and this is important.
Yeah. I'll wait till you get back on.
Okay. Well, no, go ahead and because it's gonna
Okay.
take me. So if you wouldn't mind repeating what you just said. I'm sorry to
Okay.
be doing it to everybody, but there doesn't seem to be a.
That's all right, no problem. So June, July, and August, when we're closed in those months, we are taking $10,000 worth of operations salaries over to Crystal Lake Pool. So while the school's saving money, we got to pay that $10,000 out of another fund, right? Crystal Lake Pool, because they won't be working at the indoor pool. On top of that, we will be losing between $35,000 and $40,000 in revenue for programs. Now, those program dollars are what we use to help pay for our share. So literally during the summer will be costing us anywhere between $35,000 and $40,000.
I don't like the sound of this at all.
Nancy, you're in here twice. Which
Sorry.
I think that was, you're good now. I think that was causing feedback. I also don't like the sound of, I don't know if you wouldn't like the sound of what Corky was saying or your echo, but I didn't like either.
I didn't like my echo, but
Well,
it just reiterated my point. I don't like it.
And I think that's the big issue we have as a staff. I mean, the more we cut, the more it costs the district. You know, the new formula, the 50-50, came about because the more you cut out, the more the school cuts, the more it costs us before this last 5-year agreement. So, not only what it costs, just think of who we're not serving.
Yeah.
It's really not a good formula for the park district.
I would add too, just looking at our aquatic history, remember there's been a lot of changes over the years. We closed and tore down Crystal Lake Pool, and there was an open field for 5 years at Crystal Lake Park. There was no aquatics in Urbana. We've met all of our contractual obligations. So I'm just trying to state there's nothing forcing us or requiring us to maintain that same agreement. I'm not saying aquatics isn't important, but it's really just been determined it's not on a sustainable path. Costs are going to continue to go up, whether it's utilities, chemicals, staffing, whatever. So that capital is another, factor. I think they look at capital in a different way, maybe than we do. One, they have life safety funds they could utilize maybe in a variety of ways to help them. Two, they could stave off or take out any features that might need replaced because they don't need it. Again, we don't own the pool, so we've been a very, very good tenant over the years, and now the time is up. And I think that we can look anew to what aquatic needs we have in Urbana, but we certainly have other facilities coming online that will probably serve a more diverse and wider public than what we're doing at the indoor aquatics. So I think we need to be careful that we would say, keep the pool going at any cost, even though we're serving a narrow audience at a very high cost. If we were doing an analysis, I would look at what's our indoor aquatic costs per head and compare that to what we do at Brookins. Brookins is our most visited facility, so we already know that the cost we're expending there are much lower than in aquatics, and we're serving more people. So again, when I say unsustainable, that's what I mean for us. For the school district, I can only repeat what I've been told, and that's not what other school districts do. They can't continue it, and they have other needs, and they can't continue to pay, extraordinary high sums, just to have swimming in Urbana available on a Saturday or evening or what have you. So it's not being critical or attacking or blaming. It's just kind of accepting what's changed, like all those other changes that have come through our aquatic history.
Well, it would feel a whole lot better if this were done in a process of openness in the way that we as a park district have always taken care of our business. And this is not that at all.
I also think the only thing I would caution is, I mean, I wasn't here, I was not on the board when this pool was built, but if we were, I believe, always committed to rebuilding Crystal Lake Pool. And so there was that sort of commitment to the community to provide something. No?
No, not when we tore it down. I think there was no further, I mean, there was a hope. We had hoped, but, that hope came and went. We had in 1999, a master plan for a new pool at Crystal Lake. When the option ran out on the indoor, we shifted through the outdoor pool overboard and we embraced the indoor. So I think we need to be clear about our own past and our relationship with aquatics. It was not, while it might have been a historic facility, it wasn't the highest priority. We did other things. We built the Phillips Rec Center. We expanded the Nature Center. We developed Meadow Brook Park in those years as well. So I'm just saying that I think there's maybe a perhaps false impression that we owe aquatics to Urbana, when in fact our own history doesn't show that, and we've been subject to a number of changes due to situations out of our control. I think this is one of them. Would it have been nicer for us to have a few more months to, maybe put together a different agreement? That would have been my preference. I'm not saying we still couldn't do that, but we discussed, the realities of drafting it, reviewing, having legal review it. It just seemed like the default would, hey, last time we agreed to extend the existing, we could do that again and then exercise our appropriate exits. So again, we presume that the school district will have a, discussion tonight about it. They probably have a little different perspective because they might see more savings. Certainly, again, we all appreciate working together, and it's not going to affect any of other ongoing relationships. But it is a time that we look really at what our future athletics, sports, and programs are going to be in the future in Urbana. And we have a great outdoor pool that we can rely on for the vast majority, like we did most of our history as the park district. So in some ways, things haven't changed. With the Hotel Royer coming on, maybe there's space we could rent right in downtown Urbana to create at least some level of indoor access. We rented the pools at Best Western on Cunningham Avenue for a number of years. So we had a number of facilities that we've been at. While they may not be the same type, we have to recognize that what we have at the indoor comes at a great cost, and that we're looking at rising costs as we go forward. So to maintain year-round aquatics in Urbana is going to cost the Urbana Park District a large sum of money, and I'm not sure that we can sustain that in the long term. Nor I would at least question, is that an equitable arrangement? We're awfully good at telling other groups, no, we can't do that because we don't have the resources. I would like to look at our new health and wellness as an on-ramp to a whole new audience and people that are not being served currently. So I think maybe in some ways the timing is right on, and it comes at a time where we can make a different direction.
Well, I'm repeating myself somewhat, but this pulling the plug over a month and a half, 2-month period just doesn't feel right. There was a referendum passed that helped support the school in some other ways and included building the indoor aquatic facility. And there was a referendum passed to do that. There was a referendum that we passed. It was just the park district. It wasn't the school district's referendum to build the outdoor pool. So the community has voted to support aquatics with real dollars. I get that circumstances have changed somewhat in the indoor facility at this point, but it's the sort of thing that I thought the Urbana way of doing these was, let's go to the community, explain the situation, get the community input and some buy-in on what the decisions are, not just we're throwing up our hands, we can't do this anymore, shut it down, which is essentially what's being talked about here. I mean, you're saying keep it open for May, but why would we shut it down for 3 months and then try to get in there for another 3 months following that? I'm having a little trouble comprehending how this is supposed to work.
Michael, I think that a couple of points, the bond from the school district's perspective has been retired. So they believe, again, I'm not going to defend them or speak, but that's what was shared with us. Our obligation on that was, kind of completed. And so I think they look at that obligation and what they had created that referendum had been met and paid off. So they have sort of a free range, if you will. I would let them put that in their own words, but the idea of the bond was shared with us. I think the intent is really to use the remaining time in the transition to make sure that staff is trained, anything we know and can pass on. So it would be a very active time spent getting them up to speed. And then when the pool's refilled and their aquatic season starts, that's probably where our programming would end. Again, we did talk about, basically our approach was, could we become a renter of space, which makes sense. Could we agree, hey, we'll spend X number of dollars on indoor aquatic center? I think their response was, we're not sure about that. To allow that, they would have extra cost, with custodial and supports. Maybe there's a way for us to, pay for that custodial. But the idea was then shared, their risk group is not real keen on those kind of arrangements on their side. And again, I think they're looking at a very different way to operate, not having lifeguards, things like that, which add to that management cost. Probably, I'm only imagining using existing staff to coordinate any use or management of it. So there could be any number of levels of savings, for them. Again, Leslie put together a budget based on our line items, how we view the expenses. They may have a different format and might, sort of reorganize those numbers in a way that work more to their advantage. I can't speak on that, but I think that was some of the ideas and hopes, at least. So again, I think it's being presented as, this has probably come to a point, maybe like Crystal Lake Pool, where you can't continue any longer and you have to make some radical changes to kind of get back into a sustainable mode of operation. And again, as Corky pointed out, reductions, closure, or limited use only increases our cost because we have to go find the money to keep all the staff. We didn't assume you'd lay people off, for those downtimes, but that, we could really use them back on the park district's clock, if you will, and help us with any number of level of needs that we have. And, there are other facilities that are available, for people to use. Obviously, if you have access to the university, there's any number of aquatic opportunities. The Y, is available for those that probably are a large group of our, at least, membership that want to swim on a weekly, day-to-day basis.
Just a quick point of clarification. I know that when we talked about re-upping the existing agreement, we recognized there were terms that we would need to follow. The existing agreement has 6-month notification by either party to end the agreement. So that's the current timetable by which we would have, or they would have to work with if that were the decision. So, for example, if it were February, by August, we would need to be pretty sure what we're doing.
So that would allow us to operate through May, take the shutdown, clean up. That would be a great time to train their staff. You know, what's the shutdown look like? How do you manage that? Look toward staffing or arrangements they need, you know, for their fall season starting in August. Refill the pool, continue to train, and then transfer out. All final details within that timeline Derek just described.
And you're proposing we would or would not have public programs in that pool this fall?
We would this fall.
But with people knowing full well, I mean, there's no point in buying a pass for what it would normally have been for a much longer season, right?
We have a 3-month pass that I probably would recommend to them if they wanted to stick with us through that.
And again, you know, as far as
after they've had 3 months downtime over the summer where they had to go to the outdoor facility.
Yes.
I mean, this is not going to be a successful marketing approach. I mean, no offense to you, Leslie. I mean, you guys do a wonderful job with that. That's not the way you treat your customers.
Oh, I know. I know.
Yeah, Michael, I think, you know, it would have been more convenient last year to have this in mind. Then we could have kind of wound things down and handed things off. So it's kind of coming abruptly. I think they're struggling with the same situation of how to manage the cost and look to the future and trying to reduce their footprint. It's not going to get any easier to support, you know, the indoor aquatic center. So it just may be a situation that is, you know, served during that time, but maybe the cost cannot be sustained and they have to look to new models. You know, I can't believe that there wouldn't be a potential, you know, opportunity for some level of access. We just can't tell you tonight what that's going to be. I would recommend by agreeing that next, you know, round, that become part of our process. What could they offer? What would it cost? How would that look? And give us an opportunity maybe to put something in place for beyond that. That would make a lot of sense to me. And I think staff's already thinking about, you know, what are our key priority programs that we think likely if we were going to ask, what would those be? Leslie, what would you recommend at this point? Just tonight, not holding to a future agreement, but based on your knowledge.
Swim lessons are huge. That's a huge thing for the community as well. I would never want to completely just get rid of those. Water aerobics is extremely important in our, you know, in our community. So I would look at that as well. Those would be the two biggest programs off the top of my head that I would want to try to find space for and try to keep going at some capacity.
And lifeguard training gear.
Lifeguard training too, yes. Yep.
And our thought is, you know, if we are currently paying what we are, would we have some portion of that we could offer and say, you know, would you take this much to allow those kind of activities? You know, would that help them? Would that support some of their expenses? I don't know. Again, we talked about it. They weren't able to say yes or no definitively, but said we would look at that.
Well, and that's also, I think, part of the intent to extend it on through a few more months so that we can get all these things, you know, worked through. Whether they work or not, I don't know what the school's going to allow us to do from a rental standpoint, but at least we can look into those options. If those options aren't available, we're going to be working on what can we do to offer those water aerobics classes and the swim lesson classes. Not to the extent, obviously, that they are at the indoor pool, but at least be able to have some form of what we used to have.
How much is it going to cost the school district to operate that pool, to keep it in working order in it for their teams?
Just them?
Yep.
So what was, after that budget was done, it's $186,060. That is without, like I said, reallocating money or having other people that know things that, you know, already work for them come over and do. So that's my best guess. I have no clue where they would put, you know, some of the other expenses and stuff. So that's just us out.
I would also say that's a full year of utilities that you have figured into that. So if they shut down for 5 months, then it can be less.
Utilities alone are $100,000, but I think they'll still need to condition the environment to some extent. They'll still reduce it. They'll probably, well, I think what Michael suggested earlier is, you know, they can internalize some of the costs with their own custodial, and they have in operations, actual electricians, actual mechanical contractors. But of course, there'll be a learning curve for them to learn about aquatics, because it's a very different animal.
And again, keep in mind, all the other area high schools that have pools, that's exactly how they operate. So I think their research has indicated, hey, we could probably be more in line with our other local schools in the cost that they're incurring.
Right. I find it really a sorry excuse to say that the bond has been paid for. I think that when you build the building, you build a structure, you build something like this with the community's money, and then you say, well, we paid for it, now you don't have any more access to it, you can't, you know, we can do with it what we want because you've paid for it. But that's the point, we have paid for it, and we went into it, in my feeling, with the promise that this was to be a shared facility. And I feel like we're really letting we as a group, as both groups, since it's not our choice, I'm going to put the blame on them, that they are letting the community down in a major way because they're reneging on a promise they made. And just because the building has been paid for, big deal.
Nancy, I agree with I think I understand your sentiment, but just so we're clear, that's not the same standard we applied to ourselves with Crystal Lake. That facility was paid for. It was not able to be maintained in the way. And we walked out and tore it down and left a hole in the ground for 5 years. So I'm just saying that things change, and you have to realize this is now, as much as, you know, how far back do you go, I guess, is my point. So I agree with your understanding, and that was the sentiment going in, but that was what, nearly 25 years ago. And to say, well, nothing has changed or dramatic influences haven't reshaped, you know, your path, I think it's just unavoidable. It's bound to happen, whether it's now or 10 years from now, or, you know, at what point. So I just, you know, again, we have to make sure we're applying the same standards to ourselves.
I actually don't see them as particularly as comparable, but.
Oh, we did have the other point I was going to make. We did have an arrangement for 17 years, and that sentiment, my understanding of the why 17 years, the idea was that we would have a very long time to assess how working together and what the cost and management issues would be, and we completed that. So I think, meaning we could leave that agreement behind. That led to a different agreement, and we're certainly shaping and talking about a new future as we go. So it's very consistent with change and how things go in recreational facilities and cost and management. And there may be a day where they have to close that pool because it's no longer able to be operated in the way that it might need to be. So, you know, I'm just saying we'll have to wait and see, but I'd be less, I guess I'm more sympathetic to their situation in what they're facing. Clearly, we have very different viewpoints on maybe what that facility means. They see it literally as a tool to manage their teams, and really not a whole lot. So that doesn't mean that they're against the benefits that it could provide. They're just saying we can't afford that anymore. I'm sure if the park district was willing to stand up and pay their share, we could probably continue. I don't believe that's feasible. We didn't discuss any of those kind of ideas because, again, we're struggling with rising costs as it is. Even a so-called shutdown for the summer, neat concept, but it costs us more money, quite a bit more, to be able to offer that. So it doesn't seem like that's sustainable in that sense. And I would also include, we're trying to make the best of this situation. It wasn't, our team's idea, but this is what's being presented to us. And I would urge that, we focus more on how could we see what kind of programs could be supported and at what level and who pays that cost.
Well, in terms of any decision-making on the part of this board, the question is, do we renew an agreement, which is expiring at the end of April? Is that correct? And we don't actually have the new draft in front of us, even at this date.
Right.
Right.
So,
Michael, I just didn't want to cut you off, but I did want to mention one of the ideas was to let it go and end in May. And I think Corky and Leslie and Jennifer would probably kind of be concerned about the programs scheduled at that time. So that I'm just trying to explain the logic that we use. So the next best thing was could we still get through that time? Hey, you're going to need some transition time. Could we create some sort of agreement to get us through next year or part of that year until they're in a position and we're in a better position to make new arrangements? So I think we did look at just letting it lapse out. That would probably be the simplest, cleanest. But we also thought that doesn't give you a lot of time to message or look at opportunities, that sort of thing. So we thought the high road was agreeing to renew it, take what time we could to transfer and let our customers know, and then see what we could find as replacements, knowing that we have the outdoor where we still could do water aerobics, swim lessons, guard training, like we did for the previous 70 years of operation at Crystal Lake.
So you will bring us an agreement in April?
That would be the plan. And we could certainly bring it to study session to review it. And then, it should be something familiar to us, but we could certainly look at that. The plan would be to put it on both boards' agendas for April. And then that would carry us through that window of time until, our time is up in a leadership role there. Again, we've always assumed a caretaker role, stewards, if you will, of the facility. I think we've left it, in fantastic shape. Operations has done a marvelous job. I know when I was superintendent, there was essentially no cost or time that was, too valuable to apply to it. But we knew that at some point that might change, that limit might be reached. And I think, we're obviously there at this point. So I think there are still opportunities. We just don't have them in front of us tonight. We may not have them in front of us, in April, but that would be the go button for us to look at, hey, what could we find? What would the school district be willing or able to afford or offer? We discussed, for additional revenue, could they, rent it to, Mahomet School District for their swim team to come over and practice? Maybe. They would have to kind of look at what the cost of operating means, what kind of custodial and supports. We certainly would ask and see if the programs that Leslie just identified, could be arranged at any level.
You're muted, Derek.
Derek, you're muted if you're talking to us. I'm not
Sorry.
sure. Okay.
The question for Corky. Corky, am I correct that our agreement, our 5-year agreement that expired April 30th of 2021 has been renewed once for a 1-year term? And so-
Correct.
So we would be
That's my
taking
understanding.
the same agreement and simply renewing it for another year,
Right.
the same 6-month terms for termination.
Probably would be the same agreement. So yeah, I would say it would be the 6 month. I mean, we could easily change that from 6 months to 3 months, or I mean, I think that would probably be our discussion here after we hear from what their full board tells us they want done.
I would add, Michael, too, for public listening tonight or watching, this is not a new discussion for our staff. I don't know how many times we've had this, discussion at matrix level. Why does it cost so much? We can't continue. What's the limit? Where's the line? How do we begin to reverse, costs? So I think we're here now because we've been able to sustain it and carry it through those additional years past that first 17-year contract.
Yeah, that discussion's we've heard from the school district.
Right. So the fact that we're bringing it to you all now in an official capacity, we wish there was a little more time for us to, come back next month and, maybe discuss it more. But that's kind of where we are. And I don't think that doesn't change the cost or the facts, related to that. I think it's a decision that they've made. It does impact us, but, I guess the agreement had exit clauses for a number of reasons, probably including this reason.
Yeah, I think as Corky suggested, we initially thought that if we moved towards some sort of suspended summer operation, we'd want to
Raising
get that
money
all.
for the. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Right, Nancy?
We're raising money to repair the tennis courts that their tennis team, boys and girls tennis teams, use, and they are completely unwilling to put money into that. And yet they're quite happy to keep using our tennis courts at our cost.
You're
and
correct.
I feel like I'm being taken advantage of without much chance to talk to those folks sort of more directly. I'm really unhappy about this whole situation.
Just so we're tracking, I think, my name was on the front page of the paper talking about our ongoing relations as it relates, to athletics. I think we discussed in our athletic, discussion future when we look at a new, let's call it a master plan for, courts and fields and athletic facilities. Those are the very things we should be looking at, Nancy. We also have a baseball stadium that we don't even use it. We're paying all kinds of money to maintain that, and we don't even have programming going on. I would gladly lease it for $1 and let them take it over. Those are opportunities and probably realities that we need to square up. So it just may be this time for us to revisit, our partnership and our commitment to athletics, sports in Urbana, and determine what's our best path and, where do we go as a district.
Well, really, I think what we need to revisit is our support of Urbana school districts' athletic programs at the cost of the park district, for the cost that the park district is having to put into it.
I mean, I'm not trying to point to myself, but took the hit for saying that and raised the issue, and it didn't really get us too much further. But, I think that's a valid point, and I think we do need to do that. I think there's a number of issues, and if we're on the discussion, I'll go ahead and add in, we're still reeling from, fenced in schoolyards, basketball courts, playgrounds that were included in the state SCORP report that affects our future grant abilities, determining how many facilities of what type are in Urbana. So probably on paper, it looks like we have a number of play and basketball and other kinds of facilities that we don't have access to. And yet we're being scored and held to that account on every time we have a grant cycle. So I'm not happy about that.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
So, I think, I don't want to belabor our discussion tonight, but there is a long laundry list of concerns that we probably need to address. I think right now it's this one in front of us, but nothing's stopping us from holistically going back and creating new discussions. So I guess my point on the schoolyards is that's hurting the park district, because while they're available in Urbana, they're not serving our public. And yet if they're counted in the 10-year SCORP for the next 10 years, that's going to be the equation that will be evaluated on. And we didn't really have a say-so or discussion or be able to point that out either. So, it just begs to, how do we begin to work together in a new way going forward? And what's an appropriate role for both districts in serving the public?
One of the things I was going to suggest is that, with this agreement, we were anticipating there might be time to include some clauses about suspended use during the summer. Those conversations drug out, as Corky indicated. There just didn't happen till late. And I think we're concerned that doing anything significant would require a lot of legal review. But that notification, the 6 month, that's something that probably could be fairly simply adjusted based on whatever we think is best.
Right.
I suspect the 6 months is in there because it's a pretty serious decision, and we want to have time to think about it, and probably have discussions like this and discussions with the public. We're looking at February, which is well beyond 6 months out.
But what do we have to think about? I mean, we're not being offered any options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point.
I guess I'm still wanting a final answer on any sort of rented space. Could we become a renter to some level? And I think it was initially discussed, and I think it has concerns related to risk, at least was stated. But my question is, can we get over that, or manage, or find a way through? At least to determine, would it be worth our effort to rent space for some of the priorities that Leslie identified?
Right, but are they willing to look into that?
I mean, I think how did you all interpret that?
I think they expressed some reservations about liability, but I also think that Jennifer brought it up more than once. They want to look at it with us, so maybe that's where the discussion takes place.
My hope, and I think the team's hope, was, we could have a different discussion, and maybe it becomes we understand you had to make this decision and it wasn't sustainable for you to continue in the old way, but going forward, is there at least some level of, program space that we could afford, and see, what that would look like, and could they manage that?
I'm willing to have that discussion with them. But I don't feel like we've been left with very many options, and they don't. It is us who's pursuing the options rather than them.
Right. Well, we certainly could make that known. Hey, our board feedback was, yes, they would consider moving forward, essentially renewing our current agreement. Maybe there's a different timeline associated, but that efforts would be underway to look at what kind of rented space could be made available. That's not an unreasonable, request. Something that, they said they would consider doing. It's just they probably need to get more information. What are their limitations? Can they overcome it? Probably talking with their risk people would be a first stop.
I personally am not willing to support this agreement with the school district. Man, I don't know about the other members, but that's my personal feeling. Not with the situation as it stands.
Could you clarify that a little, Nancy? You're saying you would not welcome a renewal of the agreement under the current circumstances?
That's right. That's correct. Yep.
So
because
you would.
It's a lose-lose situation for us. There's no gain. We lose money. We have time, but we have that time anyway. So yes, that's my position.
In essence, letting the agreement expire, and then we would be out in May permanently.
April 30th.
mean, I understand that the month of May is important, but I would like to have a lot more discussion before I'm willing to agree to this as it stands. But
Again,
it's on just one vote. There are 4 other people. This is
Right.
just me.
well, I just want to, now I'm repeating myself too, but, we did present that as an option. Maybe it's just cleaner to be, done at May. But I think, the staff, knowing their, program people, and thought maybe it's worth our effort and maybe cost to agree to continue to give us more time to land on our feet, or create other options, or determine what could be offered, and at least explore that. And that buys us that window of time to do that.
But if it's going to cost us $60,000, that's pretty expensive time, in my opinion.
It
Yeah,
caused me to go ahead.
when does this, so May, what is when is this session over, this new session?
The session that's happening right now goes through almost like the 3rd week of May, I believe, somewhere in that range.
And when are the new program guides printed for?
Well, that's been a lot of fun. So, I need to have some kind of direction for staff within the next 2 to 3 days on whether summer, well, I guess what I basically told staff, plan as if we're not in there this summer, because I don't think that's an option based on what the schools told us. But it's waiting to be finalized in print until we get some kind of direction from the school board tonight and from what our discussion is.
Yeah, in many ways, I think a 1 month extension as opposed to a rule. I mean, I don't know if that's a possibility to finish out the many programs, but it almost sounds like we can't even promote things because there's too much up in the air. So, and that program guide is not an inexpensive.
Well, let me just be clear though, Meredith, the May, that's already in the guide now that everybody has.
Right.
So the next guide, there wouldn't be anything for the summer, so it'd be the fall guide that would have the September stuff in it.
When is the fall guide printed? I mean, I guess
that we have like a month to decide on what goes in that.
Right. So there really is no time to plan anything for fall either.
Well, that's first edit. We've probably got like 2 months to really figure out what it's going to be.
The way that I did summer guide is I did a kind of both scenario type of thing. So I have one if the pool was open, and then I had one if the pool was closed. So I did double the work, but it kind of, gave me a little relief, I guess I should say.
But originally speaking, we were talking about if this is what they want, let's see how we can include May. They were actually in the beginning, they were talking being closed May through August. And we're like, well, we really need May. So, how can we extend it through May? So if that's the option of the board, that is something we can take back to them for sure. But
I also agree in terms of trying to rent space. I think that's maybe the ideal solution if this is, all we're getting. But at the same time, I agree. I don't want to lose money waiting trying to decide if really nothing is. If it's really clear this is the direction they're going to go in and we're not going to even have access, then it's
Well, that was my thought, Meredith, when I first squared up with it. Thought, well, just let it. We're done. Why would we incur all this cost? But then we did kind of come around as a team. Okay, what else? There's information, programs. We're willing, as community partners, to help their staff, take on this new opportunity. And so that kind of led to, well, could we extend it, give us a little more time? I think that led us to think the English fund might come in pretty handy to absorb some of those additional costs as opposed to new tax dollar. So that was sort of our framework. But I think we were going into that meeting thinking we could be done, at the end of April. So we're trying to think, what's the next best thing? What can we do to help our own public? And what's a solid position that we could stand up behind? Hey, we've been here, we'll help you through the transition. We may incur some additional cost. And again, I'm not saying that all makes sense. Somebody else could look at it in a dollar and cents approach and say that I can't support that if it costs more for no real benefit.
I think it's just back to Michael's original point about how we do things, and it just doesn't feel good that they have been a good community partner until this is just, I recognize you all have heard this for a long time, but at the same time, it doesn't sit well with how are we going to educate the community on what is happening in such a way that, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's no good way to break this bad news.
Well, unless they're willing to pay more or help find resource, that's really where we are. And I don't mean to say that in a cold way or get called out on that as an unkind or uncaring, position. That's not my point, but it is the cost. And that's what we're struggling. If we were able to afford this, we'd be sailing along just fine. But I think it's something that our own staff have come to the terms of, we just can't continue to pay more as costs go up. What is the break point? Or do we starve our health and wellness population because we're funding one area of aquatics? That doesn't seem fair or equitable to that audience. So I don't think there's a balanced equation here on what we're trying to do from the park district's perspective. So probably coming into some sort of cost and equity balance would make a lot of sense. And then what can we do to serve the public in how many different ways? So maybe part of the answer is some maybe perhaps limited aquatic element, but offering a whole new venue of opportunities with health and wellness. So, maybe that's the public message and the outcome. Now, if you're an aquatics fan and that's all you really care about, that may not be your favorite message. You're happily content just going to that facility to meet your needs. But I do think it's a bigger question down the road for the UPD. How will we operate with our own rising cost?
Well, and and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this, but we are spending money to make it easier for them to take over the running of the facility. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Yep.
And that's what led us to think, wait, that doesn't work. We've got to end this. This can't continue, or, these kind of an arrangements. So like going forward with the summer closure would continue to cost us each year. So I thought, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. How do we win, or how do we recoup? So I don't think that works well. You would almost have to keep it at full tilt, spending at whatever it costs to get your derived benefits, in my mind.
I'm kind of with Meredith on this. I think I would close out what we are committed to with our public and let it go.
Yeah.
I'm certainly okay and understand that. Again, that was a position we discussed at the meeting as the beginning of the meeting. We said, hey, time's up. April 30th is coming. Again, I think then sort of the abruptness and what do you do about May and all the extenuating costs or concerns started to come in. So we thought, okay, what's the next best thing? But I agree that next best thing isn't best necessarily for us because it will cost us. Would the school district agree to pay that difference? to have kind of things go their way, would they be willing to cover our loss? I'm not sure, because I think right now they're really struggling with finances, and every bit spent at the Aquatic Center is what they're trying to correct. So, but certainly willing to ask.
And again, maybe I misunderstand, but we have programs already running through May. I'm not talking about new programs. So we would have to refund people and end their programs early if we just canceled it in April 30th.
So
I guess I'm confused here because my thought is
Leslie did clarify with me that the programs for this brochure go through April 30th. Okay. So yeah, there are memberships that would have to be either refunded or transferred over to the outdoor pool for the summer.
Okay, so we could make a clean break. That's what I was, I guess, hung up on, like, because my class doesn't go.
So my mindset was on a different. I was thinking differently based on the fact that if we close in April, there's nothing for May, and then we open an outdoor pool. So I was trying to transition, so at least we made it to the outdoor pool season. So people would have an aquatics option through
lap swimmers. Lap swimmers would be able to swim all the way through May and immediately go over to the outdoor pool and continue their lap swimming.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the guard classes are what we're.
Well, that's what I was wondering about. How would this affect staffing the outdoor pool? Come
currently,
the end of May.
We're starting our guard classes now. We have one coming up actually this weekend, and then in 2 weeks, and so we have them pretty much every other week until we open. One thing that we would have to do is make sure that that outdoor pool is up and running for us to do a full guard class or two, which could be, 2 full weekends or, things like that. But that would be something that we would have to coordinate with Derek and his staff to make sure that we, can get it in there. That's how a traditional outdoor pool operates, is that you have it up and ready. You do your guard classes in the beginning of May, and then you open at the end of May.
Yeah, you let your guards get blue lips, but
we have heaters now.
We have heated water, right? Well, I wanted to add, now that you mentioned that, is there any way we could extend our outdoor season? We do have a heated system. It would cost, and you'd have to deal with guards. I don't know if that's feasible.
I highly doubt it, Tim. I'll be honest.
Right.
Jennifer and I are up in guard chairs by the end of the season, the majority of the time.
Right.
So I guess going back to this, I just want to make it clear. Is it the thought that, if we don't extend, we won't have the option for rentals? The whole point of it, I understand trying to make the lap swimmers whole and all of that, but I really think that if that rental thing is not able to be part of the conversation, then I don't see us needing to extend through May. I guess that's kind of how I'm thinking about framing it.
Yeah,
I understand that.
Yeah, I get it, and I don't. Either way, I think we need to think about it. Even from a rental perspective, they're only going to have water in the pools from August to February.
Right.
So I'm just making that clear. It's not going to be an all year round. We can use their facility.
Yeah, I think they were saying second week of August, so about half of August through February.
Their swim season starts that second week of August, and then ends pretty much the second to third week of February.
Okay.
But that still leaves room for rentals.
And
but are you saying that that's the only period we'd be able to rent it?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it'll be a pool, like a school pool season.
But that can be adjusted to, and you could still offer swim lessons. We could still offer swim lessons, and we could still offer aerobics classes, things.
No.
Not
And
not at the
yeah.
full capacity, but at some.
Right, if they were able to, offer that option. 'Cause
Right.
I think they're looking currently without more information. Well, I think they know it would cost them more to do rentals because, like Katie was in the meeting with us and she pointed out on school's behalf, they would have to cover the custodial for those additional. It's different than the boys and girls swim teams, dive teams, but then once you add each component, somebody's got to come through and take care of things. So our costs could certainly include that if they could provide the people power to do it or the service. So I think they're probably willing to look at it, but it may be a cost question. And unless we're able to provide all the cost coverage and their risk is supportive, I think that's probably what you're looking at. So we ultimately would have to see what that cost, is it worth it? We don't really know what the cost is. But this extension would at least give us the chance to look at that, get a final answer.
I think it's an a psychologically unsound plan to assume that people are going to want to do lap swims for a little bit at the indoor pool and then look for someplace else in town until they can get back outside. I think people, that's just not how people work. I mean, I wouldn't like that myself. I would, I want to find someplace where I can go and exercise, and I want to go and exercise, and I don't want to think, well, I've got here for 6 months, and I'm going to hop over here for another week, 2 weeks, 6 months, whatever it is, and go on. I mean, I think if they're not going to even consider renting on a sort of year-round basis, that we're better off cutting our losses and not trying to figure out how to do that. I mean, swim lessons is a whole different thing, because we could utilize them, specific times for that. But man, other than that, I just don't. Is there any way that we could extend our current agreement for another month or so that we could have more time to discuss this with them and look at different options that would be better for the community than this mess that we've got?
I don't know is my answer, Nancy, because I don't really know how their, what their board would say, but I think my sense is they're doing what they're being asked to do, is to reduce costs, reduce their footprint, focus on their critical mission and their immediate needs as their first, direction.
Yes, but they haven't heard much from the community about this, is my guess.
Well, my sense is that, I don't know. I think I kind of just said it. I think that's their focus, reducing their cost, and not necessarily looking for ways to add to their cost by supporting additional levels of access to that facility.
I mean, I personally think it's important to listen to what the taxpayers have to say. But there we are.
Yeah. And I guess my experience in any time we've closed a facility, there's never support. When we closed Crystal Lake Pool and tore it down, we had a big event to come, be sad and say goodbye. And I think folks weren't really happy with that decision either. So, I guess if you go ask the public, they're going to say, well, I don't want to give anything up, just keep doing it. But then if you said, well, would you pay $26 at the window to come in and swim? Are they still there? I just made that number up, but it would be probably a large number, that you would be required to pass on. So I think there's a practicality to this of it's not feasible. Maybe literally the sustainability question is really at hand. How long can you sustain, a very high touch, high cost facility? And again, I would urge us to guard our own finances, not at the expense of helping in a way that solely would help them. If it's short term, maybe that's one thing, but certainly not ongoing.
I don't know that I'm even willing to do it short term.
Well, that would be the board's direction. I think from a public it doesn't make sense. So you've got at least logic on your side. I'm not trying to urge you to all think that way, but it's what staff thought. Well, why would we do that? We can't afford to do that. Frankly, I'll be honest. The only way I could see affording it is using the English fund to help make up the gaps. So that's really why we added that. Corky and Leslie were very clear that's what we need if we're going to, continue, or we'd have to make consequential cuts somewhere else to afford it. And that just didn't seem palatable or even feasible for us. So we tried to, how could you pay for it? Well, that's one way.
Do we have a current reading on what we're allowed to do with the English money?
We do. I think Lynn Sutke did a analysis and provided that. We have that information. I think Katie just found it and passed it on. Clearly, it's ours to use for aquatics only in Urbana. I think it could be used for
but
expenses.
it could be used for renting a hotel pool or any number of other kinds of things.
Yes. And so Corky and I were just thinking, with let's say $500,000, how many years or seasons of rental could you afford with that? Quite a few, I bet. So I guess we thought we have options and we have resource. So we're not out of the game. It just may not be at the indoor aquatic center. It's got to be in Urbana though. That's a key point Katie underscored.
I would like to have some information about any availability of indoor water in Urbana.
Again, we could look at that, and my understanding, I understood that the new downtown hotel has a pool. That don't know. Again, that's about 8 months out, but maybe it's something that might come at the right time, where we could transition or go to another existing site. And again, I wanted to add too, just so everyone's tracking, our discussions with the YMCA. It's challenging in aquatics these days. I don't think anybody's winning, if you know what I mean. Certainly it's a fun activity and it's got a lot of benefits, but it's not getting any easier for anybody to offer.
Is anything getting easier to offer?
Seems hard. I point to the university because they have a built-in, audience and they have a way to collect the fee. So they probably are able to weather some of these, cost increase concerns. Certainly they're struggling with staffing, just like everybody.
Yeah, but my point is that nothing is getting less expensive. Isn't everything getting harder?
Yes. So I think that kind of brought us to probably an abrupt realization that, we probably have to start dealing with cost realities. What are we willing to spend? What do we need to preserve? Where else could we sort of relocate our efforts?
Nancy, just by an initial little search that I did for at least the hotels in the area, there's at least 2 that I could contact and start talks with. And then there's also the apartment complexes that we used when we were shut down for the fire as well. I think Corky was at like 2 or 3 of the apartment complexes, if I remember correctly.
It was Campus Connections. What was it now? One Main or one?
Something like that we used. Yeah, but I thought we were in talks with a couple of them at the time.
Yeah, there was another one outside of that one, but that's the one we really used.
Yeah.
But that's only going to cover aerobics, right?
Sorry?
That's only going to cover aerobics. Those aren't lap pools.
It won't be for lap swim, but we did do swim lessons there, and it was water aerobics as well.
Swim. I keep forgetting about swim lessons. Yeah, I keep forgetting about
Get those kids swimming.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's really important.
Well, it's super important because we need young people learning how to swim, or we're not going to be able to have aquatics outside either.
Right.
Yeah, we will, because people come to the pool to play. It's a family aquatic center. It's not a swimming pool.
Okay, there's something to that, but you sure want your kid to be able to swim if you're going to let them play at the pool.
Lifeguards were like that too.
One would think that was the case. I'm not sure that's the case. One would think that ought to be the case. But we wouldn't be providing life jackets if that were the case.
Yeah, so that was an initial search. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say this won't help with the lap swimming or, the actual in-water experience, but, keep in mind the Park District is planning for an outdoor spray ground at a considerable cost. I think our thought is pool staff that maintain the indoor aquatic center would come in pretty handy in operating a seasonal spray ground that could have shoulder season capacity. So we need that staff directed. I was talking with Derek, hey, can we cover that with the existing? His thought was, I'm not sure, they're pretty tied up and pretty busy with the two pools. We might have to hire more or somebody else or a halftime or, so I'm just pointing out as we continue to offer aquatic experiences, we have to look at our bottom line and how do we cover both staff and cost. They're not inexpensive to operate either. So I guess really what I'm saying is it could just be a shift in where we emphasize and put our resources. We might have an outdoor full swim experience, and then there could be another aquatic opportunity in Urbana. So I think we're doing quite a bit, and I think we're honoring our agreements and our obligations and taking care of the public tax dollar. So to misconstrue it as we're waltzing or giving up or leaving town quick, I don't think that's really the case.
I don't believe we could equate. I wouldn't call a spray ground an aquatic experience with just it is a water experience, but it is
Right.
a play experience, but it is not an aquatic experience in the way that most of us would like to think about.
I guess for people that couldn't afford access to an indoor or outdoor pool, it's probably the closest thing they'll get to an aquatic experience.
Yeah, but it's just all coming down to dumbing it all down. Right? This is not a good way to end the meeting.
No. Do we need to have a special meeting? I mean, it seems a bit much to wait until April to have any further discussion. How are we going to get feedback from what the school district is deciding?
Well, my first thought, Michael, was to, talk with school staff tomorrow to see how their discussion went. Were there any common, themes? Certainly what I've written down, more questions about going forward. If it's going to cost the Park District more, that didn't seem to set well with the board, or it just logically didn't make sense. So either ending sooner or finding a way to afford it.
Cost more and have less. I mean, let's put the two together.
Right. So, unless there was a way to cover that cost beyond the Park District, there was more propensity to end things sooner. And then we're left with, sort of a short message, but at least we're saving dollars. And that sort of leads back to, what sort of feedback or comments did they get? If they're perfectly happy with their savings and a good foot forward, there would be less likely to want to continue in a variety of different ways. The other issue of talking about future rental space certainly seemed to resonate to some degree with this group, kind of letting them know that that was something that they would like, we'd like to see. Maybe it's even conditional to signing some sort of short-term agreement. Yeah, I think we don't have a lot of.
Certainly meet some of our needs if we could rent some space at a price that's affordable, but they don't have any experience running the pool, so how are they gonna come up with a price?
They'll ask us to
We
figure
could
it
tell
out.
them. I think we know at least what our costs were. Again, I don't believe they, at least I didn't get, I don't know what staff's impressions were on operating. I didn't get any impression they were concerned at all with that in the meeting. In fact, it was more the sooner the better was my sense.
But we just heard that they have a guy in mind that I think has some aptitude, but that was about it. They certainly recognize that they'll need to do some training of them. But yeah, I don't think they fully appreciate the complexities of the indoor aquatic center.
And I guess I've assumed continuing as we've been doing isn't an option. I mean, that's essentially why they're making, these recommendations, is because that's no longer an option or one that they're able to commit to due to the cost.
Well, okay, so you get feedback from school district staff, then what? We try to decide next steps in terms of whether we need to have a special meeting or not.
Right.
Because it seems a lot to wait all the way till the April meeting when the agreement's shutting down April 30th.
Right.
If we don't renew it or extend it in some fashion.
Right. I think Derek's suggestion, would they be willing to, put a different timeline instead of 6 months, or is there another, window that we could put in this next agreement? I don't know what that buys us. Certainly a little more time for planning and transfer of knowledge. If it increases our cost, I'm not sure that's helping us. And we know the lack of being there this summer will certainly cost us, if nothing else, for staff and lost revenue.
I guess.
I would mention, go ahead, Cody.
Well, I guess I just wanted to say it sounded like they were pretty clear that really all they were going to discuss more. I mean, kind of the motion that Tim was talking about, as far as what their expectations were. I think that's all they're going to discuss this evening with the school board. So I think their hopes are to work out logistics as we move forward through the months. So I guess I'm just trying to be clear on, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of new direction other than, unless there's someone who had a lot of objection. I think they're probably going to tell us that, okay, that sounds like the plan, let's renew, and then this is kind of the direction we're headed for the end of February. I mean, is that kind of what you guys heard in the meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned the 6 months is I'm not sure we were all realizing that it is that long of a time by which a notification has to be given. I think there was some thought that we could get into it in the fall, and so as far as what it buys us, it's just that that probably gives us more time to see if there's a solution wherein we might cooperatively operate the facility. But in absence of that, if we were to renew with the current terms, then we'd have to make a decision by August.
Certainly not the best of options before us, but certainly we had them delivered to us.
Well, I'm not sure what additional we're going to come to here tonight. It's getting late, and we've talked about an awful lot of things without coming to any really firm conclusion, other than we're not necessarily copacetic with just extending this agreement with the summer shutdown and and knowing that probably the plug would be pulled on the agreement sooner than the theoretical term of it. So, and since that agreement it's 6 months notice to pull the plug on the part of either of the parties. Well, if you walk it back 6 months from February, then they gotta know the answer basically by the time they're opening the pool back up again. I mean, right? You got August, September, October, November, December, January. I mean, it's all it practically got to pull the plug on the agreement pretty much at the time that that's starting up again. I don't know. It just all feels kind of weird. Well, is the board comfortable we leave this and we see what kind of feedback we do get and try to communicate, Tim, communicate with us and let us know and see if we need to get a special meeting going to have some discussion about this yet this month. But I think we've pretty much come to the end of useful work here tonight. Anyone disagree with that? Okay. Not a pretty picture. Can we move on to there's no additional new business removed from the consent agenda. Are there any more comments from commissioners that are wanted to be made tonight? Yeah, okay. Well, thanks all for enduring a very long meeting and not one of our happier ones. So let's hope that we get some kind of feedback that we can actually get our teeth into and try to make some rational decision for this community. That doesn't look very promising. All righty. Well, I think at this point we've come to the end of our agenda. Oh, did you have something you wanted to say, Cedric? Okay. We've completed our agenda and there's no further business to come before us. I will declare us adjourned and we look forward to hearing from staff on next steps. Good night all and thanks for joining.
See y'all. Thanks all.